The content of this channel is for mature audiences. Parental discretion is advised. You're tuned in to the Green Gorilla channel. Please make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell notification button. And please, feel free to share the video. Thank you.
What's cracking, everybody? I'm GG. You're tuned in to the Green Gorilla channel. It's the place black men can express themselves freely, straight up, no chasers, man. Before I get things started, I want to give a shout out to all you hating ass, well, let me stop cursing, man. You haters. If you haven't, man, when you come in, man, can you please hit the like button, subscribe button, and the bell notification button so you can stay on top of what's cracking here on the Green Gorilla channel. Please do that. And like I always do, I want to give a shout out to all the members of the Green Gorilla channel. I'm going to try to do this expeditiously so I can get on to what I got to get on to. So big up to Show Me Brotherly Love, J. Cleveland Green, Rais Moore G, Spain Man, Lee Ways, Tahuti of New Comet, No Sleep, Ben Cannon, Kenton, and Seven Coast Dojo. Big up to y'all. Big up to Apex Prowler, Anthony Davis, I'm Just Jules, Blacksword 404, An Honest Look, Sherlin Rowe, Wiki Dawson, Stefan, Julius Ferguson, Lord Hamal, and True 7360. Big up. Big up to Mr. Me Too, Call for President, Broken Blade, Leading from the Back, Gold Professor, AKs and Curtains, H-Town, Roguish the Billmonger, BD Main, Adrian Thomason, Electrician 480. Big up. Big up to Binga, Cutting Up with the Jones, Zanko, D. Scott, Path Guy, Pete Rock, Aaron Peters, Born Nolas, Dar, Vincent Lindsay, and Beautiful Trauma. Big up. Big up to Quiz the Poet, Black Wizard, ADOS, Jazz Tech, Shadow Observer, Sugar T, Artisan MC, Kyle J. Sura, Kareem, Troy Warren, Mrs. KP Beatty, Alan Wiley in the Face. Big up. Big up to Life of Commerce, Dreamlit, A. Wilson's Ghost, Timothy Blewett, Jeffrey Speed, Marvin Battle Jr., Mark Holt, Adam, BGS Ibmore, and Ignat's Mouse. Big up. Big up to Brian Peaks, Papa Dita, Scott Haywood, Black Uru, Dr. Tree, Leroy Honeycutt, Super Tech, 77 Base X, Brian McMurray, K-Ron, and Charles Rogers. Big up. Big up to Rick Ross, Sandra Jean, Charles Gilmore, Greg Berry Little, Mr. Valentino, Jason Hales, Black Men Being Brutally Honest, Cameron 87, Dr. Rock, and Mark Swift. Big up. Big up to Odd Collar, Donald Watts, Coach Hotel, Old Soul Chief, Mr. Blue Collar, TD Hip Hop Media, Drew Main, Mr. Heat, Sir Anthony, MLR, and Universal 178. Big up. Big up to Rasheed Barnes, Aaron Smith, DH, Red Pill Revelator, Aaron Infinite, Dr. Tiasan Johnson, Kalanja Kala, Hostile ADEP, and W. Pierre 1. Big up. Can't forget the brothers David Carroll, Forrest Windu, and Kevin Samuels. Also, on the Patreon side, I'd like to give a shout out to all the people who support me there, man. Big up to Chris Flowers, Christopher Burton, Daxby, J Live, Rashawn Phillips, Keith Bass Jr., Nick Rock 1, Albert C., Dr. Ben Vincent, J. Cleveland Green, I'm the Light of My Father, Waffle Weave, Tyrone Hampton, Darnell Smith, Excalibur, Anu 219, Preserve Prisoner Taz, Dragon 59, Jake Bailey, Mr. Michi Momal, and the same with big up to all y'all. You deserve a round of applause. And if you want to know how you can support the Green Gorilla channel on an ongoing basis through a membership, here's how you do it. I'll be right back.
What's good, everybody? I'm the G with a PhD, and you're tuned in to the Green Gorilla channel, the place where black men can express themselves freely, straight up, no chaser. Today, I want to introduce you to my new membership program that consists of 5 levels where you can invest in the Green Gorilla channel on a monthly basis and receive level-specific perks. Memberships are special because they improve the quality of the content of the channel and will help me to be able to keep the channel going. Now, to participate in the Green Gorilla channel membership program, all you have to do is hit the join button, which is located right next to the subscribe button on my channel page. Now, for all of my subscribers who decide not to participate in my membership program, nothing will change. The content will keep coming the way it always has. Thanks for watching, and be careful out here, people. Bless.
All right, man, I'm GG. You're tuned in to the Green Gorilla channel. It is the place where black men can express themselves freely, straight up with no chasers. It is what it is. If you're scared, go to church. If you don't want to hear nothing that, offends your sensibilities, ride out, slide and ride out trick, holla at you. Shout out to Show Me. Big up to you, sir. Shout out to you, sir. Appreciate that. Shout out to Barry Little, man. You always hold me down. Big up to you, sir. Now, you already know what it is, man. I done brought two of my guests along, man. People who come here on a regular basis, man. One being Admiral Smoke, call him Sandog. The other being the Nameless protagonist. What's cracking with y'all? Os, Rue, what's happening?
Os, what's good, fam?
What's up? What's up? What's up? What's up?
Okay, yeah, my mic was muted, man. First of all, man, Happy New Year to you, GG, and the GG channel, man. It's the first time we're talking in a 2023.
For sure. Big up, man. Big up to y'all. Happy New Year, man.
Happy New Year.
Yeah, man.
So now, man, so just, when we was rapping the last time, man, we were talking about institutions, right? And so, we had put up, in a military format, we were talking about, the operations order paragraph that comes from the military, right? And the first one mainly being the situation paragraph. And the situation paragraph, in a sense, explains everything that you're going to be dealing with, right? Both on the good side, according to what you believe, on the bad side, according to what you believe, and it also interprets the entire environment, right? So I'm not going to belabor people with going through that whole presentation. If you want to see it, you can go back. You can take it and you can go back into earlier shows, right? And so,
for sure. And shout out to Rashad McKinney, though. Shout out to Rashad McKinney, man. Big up to him. For hitting me up on the Cash App. Big up to him. Proceed, bro.
That's what I'm saying. You know what I'm saying? So at the end of the day, for those of us who are going into any kind of form of warfare, or even if you're going into business, for example, right? You're going to study the environment. You're going to understand the effects of that environment and the impacts of that environment. And basically, that's what it sets up. And so what we did was we identified institutions on the state level, and what was the overall situation that was happening, right? And so now we're doing this to identify what people would call, in your forms of racism, right? Which are institutional, structural, and then the third term escapes me for right now, for whatever reason, I don't know why. And so now today, what we're going to do is we're going to go into the purpose of these institutions, right? So what happens is I'm not looking to belabor things. I want to get you right into the meat of it, and then within a week or so, I'm going to combine all of these concepts, and then we're going to go into paragraph 3, which is execution, right? And so for those of us in the military, execution is actually what you're going to be doing, right? Who you're going to be shooting and how you're going to shoot them up, how you're going to mess them up, and how you're going to get out of there. And so that way I could show you, like, from the state level to all the other institutions as they funnel down, to include non-state institutions as well, how in the execution paragraph, I'll make a very simple plan. I'll draw it out in terms of, in the military, we call it operational terms and graphics. So whenever you guys watch those military films and you see the dudes pushing the stick and there's like this square box and, it has this on the inside of it or that on the inside of it or a diamond, right? And so the square box represents friendly forces, and then a diamond in red will represent opposing forces. So I've reached out to some of my people because I don't have that software anymore. And so that way, for the next show, I could show you, I could kind of show you in the sense of, what it looks like in battlefield planning, and then talk about how these forces have moved against us and put us in the circumstances that we're in now, and to ultimately share with people what Gigi has been saying and what's been said across the space is that, again, historically speaking, racism isn't a feeling. It's not. It's not just an attitude. This is a. This is the real deal. This is something that's within the infrastructure and the culture of the country. Because remember, institutions are made by people, and then once people come into play, they're gonna pass laws or they're gonna have ideas that's going to shape their particular society.
Oh, for sure, for sure. Shout out to Cutting Up with the Jones. Let me give him a shout out right here. Man. He says, GG Sandog, Nameless, my favorite team up. Big up to him, man. And let me go back, though, because I want to read what's being said on these stickers. Barry Little says, tonight's tuition, stay informed, stay empowered, support independent black male media, support the Green Gorilla channel. Big up to him again. And again, Show Me says, big up. I got to give him a shout out again. Sorry for the interruptions, man. I just got to do the housekeeping.
Nah, man, I feel it, man. Don DeMarco, you know what I'm saying? I feel it. You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying?
That's right.
I'm here for it completely, right? And so, guys, remember what we talked about, right? So, again, the purpose of the state is a centralized political organization that enforces rules over a population within the territory. So if you've been rocking with me, Gigi, and Nameless, right? So now we're talking about a mission statement, right? Who, what, when, where, how, why, and how, right? And so the how will be expressed in the third paragraph that I mentioned earlier, which is execution. And so now when you go back into that, right, we talk about the state, right? And again, a centralized political organization that enforces rules. And so remember when we talked about Bacon's Rebellion, right? So this is kind of like my quick recap in a sense, right? So now we talked about, and before we talked about things like Bacon's Rebellion, and then how Bacon's Rebellion took you into things that will set the precedent from our condition, right? So you're starting with John Punch, the indentured slave who ran, the indentured servant that ran away with the two other European indentured servants. Those guys get a minimal sentence, and then he gets put in servitude for life, right? And then when Bacon, and then on the way out of Bacon's Rebellion, you get paternus sequitur venator, right? Which is what follows the womb, and saying anything that comes out of a black woman's womb, for the most part, is a slave. And then from there, you jump into the 1705 slave codes, right? Which again, now this is coming down from the state, right? So this is from the House. This starts from the House of Burgesses in Virginia, and then will evolve all the way up into the Continental Congress and well off into the future, after that, right? Because now, even with the War for Independence, which is supposed to be all about freedom, the question of the status of black people is something that's up in the air and will be ultimately determined after these revolutionary wars. And as we all well know, that these are things that haven't turned out, for the most part, in our favor, right? And then so now, even when you get into the state, right? So state institutions are an economy's primary facilitator of social and economic development, right? And so that's what I'm saying. So again, these institutions could be a major source of growth. Effective institutions aid investment in physical and human capital and research, development, and technology, right? So now what ends up happening for the most part, because remember, at a time, even the North has slaves. And so now, when you're looking at what's being formed within the United States of America, and shout out to the Nameless protagonists, right, for identifying that a lot of what you would call nation states, especially once you get into the exploration and colonial era of Europeans, these places are corporations before they become countries.
Yes,
right?
sir. Yes, sir.
So
now, before you finish that thought, I got a lot of housekeeping to do, man.
Yes.
Sorry about that. I don't mean to break you off, dog. I love you. I rock with you. You know what I'm saying? Feats and all that shit. You feel me? But I got to give a shout out. Huh?
Pay them bills, fam.
Yeah, man, I gotta pay the bills. Shout out to ML Law, man. As always, he says, supporting my black male scholars, man. Shout out to him. Got to give him some fanfare, man. Thank you, sir. Appreciate that. That generous donation right there.
My dude unlocked an achievement just now, man. Go ahead.
Yeah. Let me answer that, MLR. Niggas don't.
Hey, man, I have a flair for the theatrical, bro. I mean, even
Look, we're not even mad at you.
Hey, look, it's entertaining. You know what I'm saying? We talking though, so I mean, if I had my face and shit on the screen, it'd even be more theatrical. I'd probably have fucking puppets and shit going. You know what I'm saying? All kind of crazy shit going on. Special effects shit, lights flashing in the background. But maybe a year or so from now, I'll do show my face. You know what I'm saying? Let motherfuckers see Rico Suave in real action and shit. You know what I mean? But
let me know so I can perm my hair.
Oh man, shit on my shoulders it lay. That type shit like I'm Ice T or something. No, but anyway. Shout out to that brother, man.
Chair, man.
Shout out to that brother, man. Also, shout out to Afro Troop TV. Appreciate you, man. Welcome aboard, sir. Thank you so much for being a member of the Green Gorilla channel, man. Thank you so much, man. Thank you. Appreciate that. And then also I want to give a shout out to the Light Bearer Council. Says, love this tag up. Let's go. Let's go indeed, man. Appreciate that. So for both of y'all, man, I want to give a shout out. You know what I'm saying? Thank you for the donation. And thank you so much, sir, Afro Troop TV, again, for becoming a member of the Green Gorilla channel. You deserve an air horn for that. Yeah, appreciate that. So, back to regularly. Oh, we got another donation from Ghetto User 49. You know what I'm saying? Thank you so much, sir, for that kind donation. You deserve an air horn, sir.
Don DeMarco.
Mixtape, baby. Mixtape, baby.
Right.
Mixtape. I was thinking about, doing some rap songs, man, some recitals of some rap songs about why niggas is basically doing passport bros.
Yeah.
Like the first one I'll do is, a bitch is a bitch, whether I'm poor or rich. I'm talking the exact same pitch, not a title, bitch. Don't apply to all women. Maybe I should go through all the rap songs explaining why contemporary women have their fucking noses stuck up in the air and niggas ain't going for it. But I'll do that at another time, man. You know what I'm saying? And express my sentiments on that, because I said I was going to do it this week, and I will. I'll probably end up doing it tomorrow. Right now, BGS is having a conversation about the passport bros and so on and so forth. But eventually, I got to put my foot into that water, But anyway, shout out to Ghetto User. Appreciate the donation, sir. And so now we're going to have a clean run for at least about 5 minutes or so, man, before I, do any more shout outs. But yes, sir, man. Please commence with the.
So now we're talking state and state institutions, right? And I said the state institutions are an economy's primary facilitator of social and economic development, right? So now when we get back to the Confederacy, for example, right? And when the Confederacy gave the cornerstone speech, the vice president of the Confederacy, and he talks about how white supremacy and slavery is the cornerstone of America, right? This is what drives the United States. Its economic engines and its institutions are all built around supporting this thing called chattel slavery, which is at this point especially if you're the agrarian South, 100% of your GDP, or the overwhelming majority of your GDP. And for America, I think about maybe 80 something of your GDP outside of the factories or whatever else it is that they, that they have in the North, right?
Let me stop you right there. Can I stop you? Is it okay for me to stop you and ask you a question about that?
Yeah.
Okay, so recently I've been seeing a lot of media going around which basically apologizes for slavery on the grounds that it was a ubiquitous form of social arrangement. And so for Americans to have engaged in the practice is not really all of that morally unscrupulous. I mean, since everybody was engaged in the practice, how can you, look back at history and have this, kind of scathing critique of the practice itself? So I've seen not only, white folks make these kind of claims, I've seen conservative black folks also make these claims. How do you respond to that? Either one of y'all could answer that question.
Okay, well, I could tell you this. It's because, again, ultimately it's what it facilitates, right? So when you're looking at a society of what America claims to be on paper, right, what slavery is and what it will produce. So, for example, so when you get to African Americans, especially at the end of slavery, right, there's no 40 acres. There's no mule, right? Again, you have the Freedmen's Bureau, which is is equally corrupt as it is helpful. You have a lot of Southerners who are dissatisfied with Reconstruction, and as a result of that, what do? Right? They ensure that black people cannot really own property. They force them into sharecropping, violently remove them from voting. Whatever Negro towns or economies that are built, they're being destroyed. So what happens is you go from slavery, and then once you get to 1865 and a little bit better, and the formation of the Ku Klux Klan and the Southern states refusing to recognize the Reconstruction Amendments or act in good faith in regards to the black population in Reconstruction, and then everything that would happen before, everything that would happen after that is where you get the issue. Because again, you have to remember, slavery is the institution that will shape the ideologies of Jim Crow America, Nazi Germany, and it also shapes the ideologies behind our prison and penal systems, right?
Now,
Which are not.
Sandal, let me say this because I want this to be understood from the very, very onset.
Yeah.
And it's why I put forward Sword Form 1. It's why I made that statement that you referred to earlier, that America was a corporation before it was a nation. We're talking about slavery as it was understood in the United States of America, which means we're talking about chattel slavery, where we're not talking about a human being that's in a condition. We're talking about a living entity that has a classification that is no different than property or cargo. And it's under that context where we now have hardware that is acquiring the rights of a sentient entity in being in the form of a citizen. There's no comparison, no matter where you go, because originally what Green Gorilla was talking about and bringing mention of is the rebuttal that slavery is ubiquitous across the board throughout human history, and there's some form of adjacent experience and institution that you're talking about, Sandog, that everybody else can correlate to. And I make the attestment and statement that chattel slavery is its own entity. It should not be called slavery. That's kind of a misnomer. This is a form of property ownership that goes beyond the context of anything constructed socially that could be considered an institution of slavery. And if you run it side by side with the way oxen or chickens or any other domesticated being, entity, or hardware, that's the classification individuals classified as black in America served under that context. That is a completely different creature.
Yes, but again, agreed. But then what? And then also talking about what it facilitates after, right? So now,
Right.
so for now, to your point, like with the chattel slavery, because again, you're talking about citizenship and what makes a human being. So in other societies, slaves were at least human beings, right? So if you have African Americans who are chattel slaves, and again, this is an important point, right? Because in other parts of the world, or at least as I understand slavery, you either became a slave through a prisoner of war, debt, or crime, right? So now, if you're African American and you're just simply born in America, in 1830, right? You are immediately born a slave, right? You're not a product of, you're not, part of the booty of war or the things that I just mentioned,
Right.
right?
Should you come through a black portal, i.e., a black
Correct.
woman, going back to what we cited earlier with partus sequitur ventrum, venterum, or however you say that in
Yeah.
Latin,
Yeah.
so long as that was the case, you held the classification of this, much like how, again, you see farm animals. And this is that dehumanization aspect of it is so important because black, again, serves as a classification of hardware that comes along with corporate property with regards to America as a cultural entity, which, again, didn't find its original impetus to be a country by nationalism, but through corporatocracy and corporate investment and profit. That sets the entire context. In other words, we are a kind of capital. And
Yeah, one could argue capitalism and slavery go hand in hand. You don't see the birth of capitalism until you see the birth of, the shadow slavery in the Americas, or in general, like the discovery of the new world leads to, the blossoming or the burgeoning of capitalism itself. And let's not forget, we are the capital.
Yes.
Yep.
In these here United States, like you just said, sheep, oxen. But one of the things I want to underscore here before I go on, I don't want to read from David Walker's appeal or anything like this because it'll probably take too much time. But it's important for people to understand that the quality of slavery throughout humanity and throughout the annals of history is different. Okay, so every slavery everywhere is not exactly the same. Okay. You got to be mindful of that. Like, one of the things David Walker does as an appeal is he says, on our wretchedness related to, in consequence of slavery. I think that's Article 1. Our wretchedness in consequence of slavery. And what he does is he draws out all of the different ways in which slaves were treated in different countries. Okay. He talks about Egypt and how the Egyptians treated the Jews. Okay. And that the Pharaoh basically told Joseph, you shall be over my house, and according to your word shall my people be ruled. Right? Only in the throne I will be greater than you. Right? So that's from the Bible, right? I'm not saying that you should take the Bible literally or anything of this nature. All I'm saying is that there is a precedence in the Bible that the Jews had the ability to participate in the government, right, of Egypt itself, okay? When did that happen in America? The shit didn't happen. We know in Roman culture that some slaves were actually teachers or part of the, educational system within that culture and within that society. But black folks in the United States, let your ass try to read and see what happened to you.
Correct.
I don't know how many other places in human history where it was literally institutionally illegal for a group of people who were classified as humans that are participating in that country to not have a legal right to read.
I mean, even within Saracen society, okay? And what I mean by Saracen society is I'm talking about the Middle Eastern world, Arabic culture. Even within that form of slavery, human beings had means by which to educate themselves, particularly if it came to studying the Quran. Literacy was not frowned upon for people, who were slaves, especially if it is the case that they profess to be Muslim, okay? Or converted to Islam. So, know that the American slavery is unique, virulent in its racism and its depiction of black folks as subhuman. Understand that. So, yeah, we know that slavery is ubiquitous, but understand it, just like you got different qualities of athletics, you got professionals, you got women's teams who are professionals, then you got Olympic teams, college teams, B-League team. Everything is not qualitatively the same as it pertains to slavery. That's all I want to articulate. But let me shout out to Mr. Blue Collar. Appreciate your donation, sir. You deserve an air horn. Appreciate that, sir. I really do. And shout out to the Gold Professor, man. Shout out to this brother here, man. Appreciate that. Y'all get back to it, man. Let me stop.
So again, and this is what we're talking about, right? When you're understanding institutions, right? Because again, the purpose of a corporate institution is to conduct a lawful, don't laugh at the words, ethical, profitable, and sustainable business in order to create value over the long term, right? And so again, at the end of the day, right, you're talking about a group of people that's being mass produced that are designed to facilitate the profit, the profit of this corporation that you will eventually call the United States of America, and then the other non-state actors that work for profit within this particular economy. So it's very important. It's very important that you understand that, and the fact that, again, that this was something that was perpetuated all the way into the recent 20th century. Remember, this activity for the most part, well, if you want to count the school to prison system, right, this activity is still, for the most part, has prevailed into the 21st century. And it's something that has caused a lot of the, starting with this thing of slavery, is something that has caused a lot of intellectual violence against what you would call Negroes or African Americans or anything else, right? So now let's get to the purpose of I'll skip, because we talk corporations. So I'll skip just real quick. Let's jump into the purpose of religious institutions, right? And educational institutions, right? So again, a religious institution, right, is something that, through the eyes of God, that's supposed to, go out and help the poor and the needy and, and the disenfranchised, right? And then once you get to educational institution, what an educational institution is designed to do, because initially learning things like reading and arithmetic came from the family, but then also what educational institutions do, especially with the inventions of public school, is they socialize you in order for you to participate in society. Now, what becomes very interesting about these institutions, right, is that I want you to think state now, because again, and I'll have to sit down and draw it all out. So I want you guys to think about the state, right, and then corporations, right, and so at any given time, these things are interchangeable. State.
Before we move on, I want to give a shout out to the World Passport Bros. He donated $5. I give him a shout out. He says, can you discuss Bacon's rebellion and how there were white slaves? Now, I'm going to cover this myself, and I'm going to make it as brief as I possibly can. I know this individual wanted to come up on the panel, but right now this panel is closed until the gentlemen who've been invited, Nameless protagonist, and Sanddog, also known as Admiral Smoke, until they're done and they're ready to entertain others, they have the floor. So they're going to be able to control the MC at this current moment. So we won't open it up until they're done. But ultimately, can you discuss Bacon's rebellion and how there were white slaves? Now, what I can say is that there were white indentured servants, okay? Now, in reference to white slaves, well, that's not accurate, okay? Now, if you want to call an indentured servant a slave, and if you want to argue that in some instances indentured servants were treated worse than slaves, then I would have to, actually say, okay, this is true, okay? Because you got to think, an indentured servant, if he dies prior to his indenture being served, then that person who sponsored that indentured servitude, contract, he doesn't have to, basically give out any parcel of land or to remunerate the indentured servant at all. So it's in his advantage, right? The person who is overseeing the indenture to actually ensure that it doesn't, proceed to term. Okay. Now, but what Bacon's Rebellion is, or what it was an alliance of slaves and indentured servants and, like ordinary non-planter class, right? A populist movement who was ready to fucking move not only on the Native American population, whether you can perceive that as right or wrong, we can assess that, on its own merits, but they definitely were willing to go at the, the governor's, the governor of Virginia. They were really ready and willing to burn the shit down and to basically cause some deep-seated problems for the planter class in Virginia. That they were willing to do. But the planter class was shrewd, and at that moment, what they did was they created a racial bride. Right? Prior to Bacon's Rebellion, you didn't have a black and white divide in the United States. Okay? I mean, white folks weren't even referred to as white. Okay? They were Celtics or Irish or French or, Anglos or Swedes or whatever the case may be. They were basically identified by their ethnic backgrounds. But what Bacon's Rebellion did was it created the differentiation between whites and blacks as categories that would persist even to this day. Okay, so anyway, having said all that, I'm just covering that as briefly as I can. But
let me just toss this real quick for the reference of anybody on the playback. It's just a quick history on slave insurance. I think that'll answer a lot of questions you might have with regards to differentiation. And I'll leave it right there.
Okay, cool. So on to keep going, brother. I'm sorry to, interrupt your flow.
Okay, so now the reason why I bring up religious institutions and educational institutions simultaneously, right? Because again, right, the educational institutions are responsible for the systematic transmission of knowledge, skills, and cultural values within a formally organized structure. Now,
so that's education, you say, right?
That's education, correct.
And
right?
Religion is what?
And so, in religion, religious institutions are used to reinforce the moral value, whatever deity you believe, right? They're used to reinforce the moral values, promote humanitarianism, like, reaching out to the sick, the poor, and everything else. Right.
Right.
So
now, the only thing I want to add to that is this, though. Remember the conversation we were having on Charles Faulkner's channel?
Yes.
And we were talking about cosmology and cosmogony. And to me, I would say that falls under religion, the framework of religion. OK, white people, they separated the church and the state. I mean, they were all butthurt about what was going on in relation to the abuses in, England, France, Spain, with the church, so basically, Anglos don't like the connection between the state and the church. But one thing I just do want to make it historically, I want to make a historical claim, namely that typically religion performs not only the moral or the axiological tasks that Sandog just talked about related to religion, it also interpolates the educational function within inside of it as well. Now, for different cultures, it's different. I mean, like one could argue that the Catholic Church during the medieval era did a poor job at ensuring that the vast majority of its citizens or the people under its dominion, right, its subjects, were educated, okay? The same can't be said of Islam, because I mean they had a much more, I think, open system of religion and education than did medieval Catholicism. Okay, but even more open, I would assume, would be systems in the ancient world, like in ancient Greece and in ancient Egypt, where learning was interpolated more into the populace, such that more people had access to education, and it wasn't just a priestly class of persons who are able to learn. Okay, although I don't want to get into all the intricacies of it, but I mean, education was more accessible to ordinary persons in the ancient world than it was in the medieval world in the Western world. So having said all that, y'all keep going.
Yeah, take a look at Timbuktu. Take a look at a lot of the Maroon movements that took place, particularly in the Caribbean, from individuals whose ancestors were part of the trans-Sahara slave trade or who happened to be in the Arabic portions of Central and West Africa. You'll notice that there's a commonality there. And the common denominators is knowledge of medicine and literacy. They almost go hand in hand.
For sure. But I mean, it's just, I think the separation of the church and state may have been necessary in the Western world because of the corruption of the Catholic Church in the Western world. But I don't think it's necessary to separate the state from the church. I mean, this only happens in the Western world where you can't get a marriage between morality and justice. You can't get the marriage between the two in this country or in this culture. That's what I meant to say, not country, but this culture.
Because I mean, look at why Islam spread 600 AD the way it did. Who was in charge and what was the predominant religion? You know what I'm saying? Like, to your point, Gigi. So yeah, you are absolutely right.
I mean, but I'm just saying, like with great power comes great responsibility. I know it's some Stan Lee bullshit, but I mean, these are the facts. Okay, so I mean, in the Western world, religious dogma was anti-intellectual to a fault. Okay, and so I mean, you got people like fucking Galileo, who basically came up with the heliocentric understanding of the universe for people in his culture during his time. He realized that the Earth was not the center of the universe, and they put the motherfucking dude on house arrest, man.
Right.
Right. For the rest of his life. Like I mean, they were burning people at the stake for this shit. Like if you don't profess what they consider to be doctrine, they will murder and kill you. So, free thinking, open-mindedness, the interpolation of new information into a system of learning was not what they did best during the medieval era, man. That's why they call this shit the Dark Ages, bro. So, shout out to Willie Threer. I don't know how to really pronounce that, but he says, is the running of the Bulls event in Spain a celebration of getting the Moors out of Europe and are the Moors of the Islamic background? Shout out to him for that. I'm not sure, man. I don't want to, make mention of something I actually don't know. Wouldn't surprise me, though. But I do think that the Moors are of an Islamic background, especially if you're talking about the Spanish Moors who basically educated Europe and brought them out of the Dark Ages. I mean, they fucking built public baths in Spain. They created educational centers in Spain. They brought international commerce to Spain. The Moors did. So, I mean, there's a great documentary about the Spanish Moors. I think the lady's name is Bethany Hughes. She does dope ass documentaries, man. So go check that out. I'm gonna leave a link for that if I can find it. So I'll take over.
Okay. Hello?
Yeah, y'all take over.
Okay. So getting back into this, right? So when we talk about your religious and your educational institutions, and that was the point that I wanted to make, was that in previous times or in older times, religion and education and family, which is an institution we'll get into later, all of these things were not mutually exclusive. So as Gigi just mentioned, in our society, because of the history of it, these things will end up ultimately becoming divided. And so now what these things do, they also intellectually reinforce a value system, right? So now when we get into Bartholomew de las Casas, right? So Bartholomew de las Casas is a church official, who would end up becoming sensitive to the plight of Native Americans and how they're being abused, and would go on to ultimately, defer to the fact that the Africans are suitable for the transatlantic slave trade, due to what a lot of people out of the book of Genesis would call the curse of Ham, right? And so again, Ham being a descendant of Noah, who's the father of Cush, which you would call, Ethiopia. And so Ham, would see Noah in this nakedness as mentioned in the Bible, and then I guess, would violate him, and then as a result of that, be cursed to be black, and then the curse goes on to say that you, the older brother, shall serve the younger. And so previously, this was doctrine that was used for the Israelites to go and exploit and kill the Canaanites, because that's the original curse, is to curse be Canaan, right? And so that was what the original doctrine that was in place, to kill the people that were on the land of Canaan, or Canaan, as we say here, so that way they could occupy that land. But then later, this will be used to justify slavery. And then, shout out to Gigi's channel, right? When you get into John C. Smith, right? Out of the United States itself, and Mormonism. And then, you get to the fact that, okay, there was beef between, God and Satan, and, there was a war and people took sides, and whoever stayed neutral was now then cursed to be black, right? And so now, within the Abrahamic faiths, across the board, across all of them, you have people who are running with this ideology that to be black is to be cursed, and as a result of that, curse, you are doomed to servitude, right? And so now you would have to, so this is what's now being used to serve the economic interests, of the state, right? So now remember, if you go into it, none of this is mutually exclusive, especially back in that time. Now you're starting to get to the point where these things will separate, right? And so now you get into, especially during this time period, you get into racial sciences, right? And so you would have whites who would discover Adam's calendar in South Africa, and they would go, "Wow, there's no way that these black people who are here made this thing or anything like them." And so now you end up having studies of, you're looking for the lost white tribes of Africa, right? So the same thing, when they see the kingdoms of Benin or Ife, which will be Yoruba, right? Again, the Germans who visited these kingdoms thought that they found what was left of Atlantis, right? And then, say less when it comes to, the Nile Valley civilization. So the idea was that there's no way that these people will be capable of such a thing. And so now, you get into all of these quote unquote, racial reasons as to, why the white man is superior to the Negro. And you get into things like, I don't know, the size of skulls and how that represents intellectual capacity and all of this other types of nonsense. And so all of this now will sit around academia for hundreds of years, right? So even when you get to Thomas Jefferson, right, in terms of what he would explain about black people, he says, they seem to require less sleep. A black, after hard labor through the day, will be induced by the slightest amusements to sit up till midnight or later, though knowing he must be out with the first dawn of the morning. They are at least as brave and more adventuresome. But this may perhaps proceed from a want of forethought which prevents their seeing a danger till it be present. When present, they do not go through it with more coolness or steadiness than the whites. They are more ardent after their female, but love seems within them to be more an eager desire than a tender, delicate mixture of sentiment and sensation. Their griefs are transient, those numberless afflictions which render it doubtful whether heaven has given life to us in mercy or in wrath are less felt and sooner forgotten with them. In general, their existence appears to participate more of a sensation than reflection. Comparing them by their faculties of memory, reason, and imagination, it appears to me that in memory they are equal to whites, in reason much inferior, as I think one black could scarcely be found capable of tracing and comprehending the investigations of Euclid, and that in imagination they are dull, tasteless, and, and anomalous. I advance it therefore a suspicion only that the blacks, whether originally a distant race or made distant by time and circumstance, are inferior to the whites in the endowments of both body and mind. Right? So, again, all of this stuff, man, is gonna come, and it's gonna come, and it's gonna sit, in academia, and this is what people are gonna believe, right? You get guys like Jorge Cuvier, right? A French naturalist and zoologist, right? And he says the Negro race is marked by black complexion, crisp or woolly hair, compressed cranium, and a flat nose. The projection of the lower parts of the face and thick lips evidently approximated to the monkey tribe, the hordes of which it consists have always remained in the most complete state of barbarism. Right? And so this,
but that gets coupled with identifying, quote, white characteristics with words and epileps that are associated with positive characteristics. So
correct.
Here you get white being made synonymous with positive, noble characteristics, with black serving as the inverse, which
yes.
Really emphasizes that dichotomy. And Thomas Jefferson is definitely one individual. You can find some colorful expressions of that before the scientific racism era. But go ahead, fam.
Correct. And then, so, and I'll get to this one. So, you get to Arthur Schopenhauer, right? And he goes, he says, a French philosopher, right? And he goes, the highest civilization and culture, apart from the ancient Hindus and Egyptians, are found exclusively among the white races. And even with many dark peoples, the ruling caste or race is fairer in color than the rest, and has therefore evidently immigrated. For example, the Brahmins, the Inca, and the rulers of the South Sea Islands. All this is due to the fact that necessity is the mother of invention, because those tribes that immigrated early to the north and there gradually became white had to develop all their intellectual powers and invent and perfect all the arts in their struggle with need, want, and misery, which in their many forms were brought about by climate. This they had to do to make up for the parsimony of nature, and out of it all came their civilization. Right? So again, just exactly back to what Nameless just said. And so you have
but let me interrupt you here. The weird shit about it is, like, ancient Greeks, like if you read Herodotus or Homer, the Greek poet, they fucking they lionized Ethiopians, or people, because Ethiopia means burnt face literally in Greek, right? People, burnt faces, right? So they regarded like Ethiopia as the home of the gods, or at least favored by the gods, and the Greek gods at that.
Yeah, so they said that the Ethiopians were so pious that Mount Olympus is in Ethiopia. Yes,
and they also, like Poseidon, the god, often was, declared to have visited Ethiopia in the Odyssey. Historians consider, Ethiopians of ancient Greek mythology and legend, it might be exaggerated, right? But even fictitious. But there's no doubt that the Greeks, they didn't have like a subhuman perception of black folks. They, if anything, they had a superhuman perception of what Africans were like. Okay?
The turning point I see? and I've told you this before, Sandog, I find an interesting turning point right there during the Renaissance era. And I think it's worth investigating if you really want to find an answer as to why, because there's a lot of consistencies. And it's interesting that the Moors were pointed out in the chat. But something happened during the Renaissance to really bring about that sudden turnaround. Because even when you get into the Crusades, this anti-Africanism isn't anywhere near what we see today in general, from every empire you see coming up out of Europe. It's during the Renaissance period that all that smoke starts to show up out of nowhere. And it's interesting how it plays parallel with greenlighting the transatlantic slave trade, using the curse of Ham as a backdrop for it. Because that's where all of the information and the change in tone seems to come from, in my observation.
Yeah. Well, baby, look, thank you for the Black Gnostic. If he wants to come up and be part of the panel, he can. Only him know. But shout out to BGS Ibmore. He said, pass the plate. I agree with him on that score. Pass the plate, man. Don't make me start, putting hymn music and stuff like that out here, man. Shout out to Spain, man. Big up to him. Appreciate that, brother. But I mean, the reality is that there was a better perception of African people in the world prior to the advent of slavery. Not to say that there wasn't any prejudice there at all. Okay, not to say that, but I guarantee you the Spaniards didn't call Moors of African descent niggers. I guarantee you that. I guarantee you they didn't think they were inferior. I guarantee you that.
Facts. Not enough to where they got them on their royal crests and royal seals and all of that. You know what? I'm gonna leave that alone. Go ahead.
Yeah, but and then a lot of white people like to fantasize about Europe and just peep like their fantasy stories, right? They're all of medieval times where there was cleanliness and no pestilence. I mean, you had a couple of jerks who were trying to, invade, relatively benign kingdoms and things of this nature. But come on, man, like they portray medieval Europe as just like homogeneous, white, like idyllic, such that there's no any kind of political turmoil taking place there. Come on, bro. Like, yeah, nothing is actually homogeneous in Europe, man. That place was invaded by the Romans. It was invaded by the Saracen world. So, even like the Mongols was all up in that joint. So, this fantastic idea of a homogeneous Europe is a lie. I'm just keeping it a buck. So anyway, shout out to Ignatz Mouse for passing the buck, man. Let y'all get back to it, man.
Yeah, shout out to
I interrupt Sandog too much, man. I interrupt him too much. Go ahead.
I was gonna say shout out to Token, but go ahead.
But like even then, right, when you talk about, Memnon, right? Memnon, whose mother was Eos, goddess of the dawn, right? And Tithyonis, if I'm saying it correctly, right? Memnon was Ethiopian, and he's the one that sliced Achilles' heel, right? He was such,
wasn't Aphrodite too?
Yeah, he was such. I'd have to go back and check it out, but he was such. Memnon was such an amazing swordsman. Like, again, it was, for a lot of people that watched him fight, said it was a thing of beauty to watch. To watch this man wield the sword, and Achilles barely came away with his life fighting. Fighting this guy, right? And so whether it be history or legend, right? There are so many positive things about Black people. So even when you look at the Abrahamic faiths, right? At the end of the day, whenever groups of people or prophets were in trouble in the Abrahamic faiths, to include Jesus, peace be upon him, and Muhammad's followers, themselves, they would flee to Africa for safety, right? Moses' wife was Ethiopian. And so again, all of these things are left out of history in order to promote a particular narrative. So now
It's left out of white history.
yeah, correct. So it's left out of their history in order to promote a particular narrative. So for example, now one of the most recent things that people bring up, like how you said, how people will bring up other forms of slavery. And so even for me, when I talk to other people, when they talk about the transatlantic slave trade versus the Arab slave trade, I tell them don't bring it up. I said, don't bring up the Arab slave trade. And they was like, well, it was history. And I was like, but here's the thing. You didn't teach it in your schools. Why? Right? Because because what happens is if you were to teach the Arab slave trade in schools, then you would learn that the Arab slave trade wasn't race-based and that they took white people as well. Right? So you would have or the Muslim slave trade in the sense, because what a lot of people don't get about the Islamic empires is that not all of them were Arabs. Right? So some were Persians.
And that's very important for people to understand, man. Like some Asian societies are Muslim, some African societies or cultures are Muslim or Islamic. People don't understand this. Like they just assume that the Middle East is the only place that carries Islam. But the fact is, there are more people who are Islamic in the world than there are Christian. Just to let you know.
Yeah. So again, so not all these people. So I would even challenge you, because again, one of the biggest slave traders to shout out to the nameless protagonist, right? But one of the biggest slave traders, looked identical to me and you. His name was Tipu Tip, right? And you could Google him now, Tippu, right? Last name Tip, and you'll see him, and black black is again black as night, and was one of the biggest slave traders, again out of East Africa, at that time. So ultimately, there are, when I talk about all these institutions at play, and then the meat and potatoes of it is when I go into the execution, which I'm trying my best to get in military terms and graphics, and to some degree with levels of animation, right? Because when Gigi played a video about Martin Luther King, and I want to give you a context from Sandog's logic about this, right? And Martin Luther King was talking about, the overt racism that you see in the South, right? With the billy club to your head, the dogs gnawing at your feet, and the fire hose, right? And then there's the racism, right? That's a little bit more covert, which is when you talk about housing laws and education, right? And many and other forms of public policies that deal with Black people, right? So when we get into the execution paragraph, I'm going to teach you about, you heard me say hard and soft power, but I'm going to talk about the difference between the traditional forms of contact and the non-traditional forms of contact, right? So what happens is, for many Black people, and I'm veering a little bit, but for many Black people, when you say Republican, right? Republican Party, they'll immediately get hot. And the reason why they get hot is because the Republican Party, at least for them, represents the hard power of racism, or the traditional forms of contact. So traditional forms of contact: small arms fire, bullets, rifles, right? Artillery, aviation, electronic warfare, etc. A non-traditional form of contact is, we attack your culture, we attack your economy, we attack your educational or your religious institutions. These are the non-traditional forms of contact. And so hopefully when we get into paragraph 3, the execution, I think where a lot of us miss the boat, regardless of race, color, or or whatever it is when you talk about racism is that a lot of us are not familiar with the non-traditional forms of contact and then the soft power that could be used to support it.
And
right?
there's a point that go ahead.
Go ahead.
There's a point that needs to be made with regards to the way technology makes it more sophisticated. So it's not as easy to detect, and you can affect a larger range of, you've got a larger area of effect with regards towards that. And it's longer reaching and it lasts longer. And I think that's an important thing to understand, because technology has greatly affected the state's ability to employ those means, not just of soft power, but to turn hard power and soft power into what you described before, Sandog, as smart power.
Yes. So when we get into it, like, I'm going to show you guys, okay, this is the small arms fire. This is the indirect fire. But this is the psyop. This is the psychological. Remember, right? I told you non-traditional forms of contact attacking a culture, right? So when you get to Birth of a Nation and Negro rule, and you start getting all the posters of black people attacking white women and defiling the sanctity of white life, or when you get into the FHA, and when you get into the FHA loans, right, when it goes, okay, you cannot sell, lease, or rent or rent to a Negro. All of these are different forms or uses of violence. And then prior to that, I'll have to sit with Gigi, and for each form of contact, I'll try my best to categorize, because there's so we'll call it physical violence versus intellectual violence, right?
Oh,
so
peep this though. I gotta show that video of Julia Brown. I gotta show this right here. You gotta
show it, okay?
Because it's an example. It's an example of psychological warfare.
Correct.
Is it not?
Yes, it is.
Okay, so here's the pretext or the backdrop of this, right? So Sandog sent me this video, right, of this woman who basically is an anti-communist, which, most black people today, if you start to talk about the ideology of communism, they would be anti-communist because they would consider themselves to be pro-capitalist, because this is just how they've been educated, okay? In this country, there's been a lot of anti-communist propaganda, okay? It is what it is, okay? Now, I'm not here to purport to support communism or to critique it at this current moment. But just know this. Imagine you are a slave. Literally, you are a product of capitalist production itself. You are a cog in a machine. You're no more than a sheep or a chicken. You are a sharecropper, okay? Why would communism sound unappealing to you?
Correct.
I'm just like, during this time, you can't own property that white people don't have the right to take from you at any given fucking moment, okay? You don't have social or civil rights from the law to protect you. If you get on a bus, you got to go to the back. If you go to a hotel, you have to enter into the back if they have Negro accommodations. Okay, this is a fact of American life. So a lot of black people became communists, and they were funded to be rebel rousers by communist nations. It's a fact. Now, you can like it, you can hate it, whatever you want to. It is what it is. Okay? Now, but you have to ask yourself, if you are rendered incapable of participating in capitalist life because you got a group of hateful, vitriolic white folks who are doing everything they can to disenfranchise you in one way or another, why not rally around communist ideals? Why not? It makes sense to me. But anyway, here's what Julia Brown basically says about communism and her role in it all together. So let me share the shit. Share. Can y'all see that?
Yeah, I can see it.
How big is it though? I can't see it at all. Okay, so yes, it's small. So let me make it. Let me. I'm not gonna show all of this.
It was a liberal commission, some of calm simps, and the cause of it all was communist dominated. The riots in this country are absolutely communist inspired and communist dominated. When I was a member of the Communist Party, the communists ordered me to incite other my people to riot.
I'm Julia Brown. For 9 years, I was a member of the Communist Party, serving as an undercover agent for the FBI. During that time, I learned that the communist conspiracy had been planning and working for years to bring violent revolution to America. It was to be a communist revolution, but the great majority of the American people would not be allowed to realize that until it had already happened. If all goes according to the communist blueprint, Americans will believe that the chaos and violence has something to do with civil rights. Our enemies were quick to find our weakest point for their attack. They knew that racial differences could provide them with an excellent wedge to divide our people. Their strategy simply has been to keep hammering on that wedge, to drive it deeper into our social structure, to open all wounds that have long since healed, and deliberately to create new ones wherever they can. Now, this doesn't mean that there isn't a legitimate need for the advancement of civil rights for many of our Negro citizens. Of course, there is a need there. Otherwise, communist agitators posing as civil rights leaders.
That's enough for me, man. I ain't gonna show no more of that shit. But look, you get the picture, man.
Fam, that chick is hilarious. Sad dog, you gotta put folks on what she said about Martin Luther King, man.
But the shit is bugged. But the shit is bugged out because you can tell that this woman is reading from a script that was given to her in the first place. She didn't come up with all this shit on her fucking own. Okay, she is a government operative, a double agent, is what the fuck she is. Okay, she works for the FBI, infiltrating what Negroes are doing in meetings all throughout America because black people were tired of getting fucking put on the back of the bus, having to go into the back of the building and being told that they got to drink at another water fountain or some shit, can't sit at the same counters as white people or none of this shit, right? And basically systematically forced into ghettos and impoverished and shit like this. So black people are like, man, why would you not have an affinity for an ideology that says, hey, look, we want economic equality. We want the promotion of workers' rights, right? We want to eliminate racial discrimination. Who would not, if you are black during this time frame, why would you not have as an option ideologically an affinity for communism? What's the alternative? American capitalism? Where you actually are a widget? And I'm not saying that, I'm not telling you that you have to accept communism one way or the other. I'm just saying, come on, let's be fucking realistic, man.
Yeah, but she said Martin Luther King was a blackmailer for seeking $10 billion in reparations.
Look, man, that chick is a whole cartoon character. But my argument, the point I was making in the chat is that she was not alone. J. Edgar Hoover had a whole network of people just like this chick, and she was barely entry level with as far as that network went. You had folks like that at every major college, every major institute. It was absolutely insane. Absolutely insane. I think every single major Black organization and every major Black neighborhood had some agent that was placed there 1 or 2 degrees away from some sort of officer that was involved in COINTELPRO, either overtly or covertly. It's absolutely insane. And what's unfortunate is a lot of people don't understand the kind of damage that caused with regards to our ability to not just mobilize, but the ability for government resources to be placed at an intersection point to hem us off from modalities of production that we would have been able to take advantage of just naturally because we were trying, naturally because we had good baseline jobs at the time that were providing good walking in the door entry level pay before the economy went into its nosedive during the Nixon era. So there's a lot of these things that are playing into the background that have left a very negative taste in the mouth of a lot of African Americans when it comes down to trying to organize around power and implementing power on an institutional level. And
but you know, Sandog is right here though. I mean, you know, and you are too. But the reality, here's the reality, man. Power is not just physical, material power. It's also psychological. I call this shit magic. Like what Admiral Smoke was talking about, what Sandog was talking about on the show the other day. To me, magic is being able to trick a motherfucker into doing something that they don't necessarily find to be in their best interest.
Well, in that,
right?
In that intellectual alchemy?
I think so. Like, okay, putting statues up of people who are to be admired and you make them like fucking 30, 40 feet tall. That's some Egyptian shit.
Yep.
But you know what it does? It creates an impression that this motherfucker's larger than life. This motherfucker standing over you 40, 50 feet tall. He must be godlike. He must have done something important for all this resources to be placed into memorializing this motherfucker. Right? To me, it's magic, right? When you see billboards and signs everywhere that bombard messages to you over and over and over again, that's magic to me.
There's a meme that's popular right now that's floating around where it has, it's split in half. On the top portion, the title of the meme is what people think witchcraft is. And then on one box where it shows a cauldron with candles lit and various items that relate to correspondence that you would expect to find in any curio or botanical shop, you know, all of that laid out on top of an altar. And then underneath it, it says, you know, daily evening news. To your point, Gigi, you know, it's people don't understand things like television, how addressing messages to not just your autonomic nervous system, but how images have such a strong influence on your subconscious behavior and how your subconscious behavior does the heavy lifting of your decision-making process, so much so that it almost distorts the way in which you discern the environment around you. And yeah, you may have some cultural influence that can provide another level of mitigation or influence, but by and large, these images have gone a very long way into terraforming the consciousness of people by addressing their subconscious understanding of it all. And it's subconscious, once more, operating on a level below most people's detection. And it's following, just like, you know, magic does, the concept of consent. Because people are consenting to look at these images, but they don't necessarily understand what they're subjecting themselves to. It's following the exact same algorithm ultimately at the end of the day. And it goes back to what I said earlier about how modern technology has found other ways of being able to implement and direct those concepts of hard and soft power.
Yeah, you know, like if anybody wants to know what the men fight theology actually is, the men fight theology, at least the way it is interpreted by contemporary Afrocentrics of the kind like Anthony Browder, like Raoun Effer or Muada Ashby, you know, that crowd of thinkers. The idea is that, okay, the ancient Egyptians already knew what Freud only began to learn, you know, in the 20th century, namely that there's two states of consciousness for human beings. Namely, there's a waking conscious, and then there's an underlying dream type of conscious, or subconscious, if you will, that is like an iceberg in an ocean. Your waking conscious is like the iceberg that you see, which is the tip, right? But the real consciousness is the thing that lies beneath the surface, right? Which is the primary motivator, right? It's the thing that you do without thinking, because most of the time human beings don't use waking consciousness in order to make decisions at all anyway.
Contrary to popular belief. You can't say that again, GG.
People don't utilize waking consciousness in order to make decisions ordinarily, okay? Now, this sounds counterintuitive, but the reality is you got to think. The human brain is ergonomic. It's a sophisticated organism, right, in your body, okay, an organ that basically functions in such a way as to be as efficient as possible. If you had to think all day, every day in order to do or perform basic functions, you wouldn't be able to fucking move. Too much energy would be expended for you actually to be engaging in that activity. So the brain, as efficient as it is, utilizes a large amount of processes that forego the need for you to think consciously all the time, which would be too time consuming and require too much energy and effort. So what happens underneath the surface is you have a form of consciousness that does the heavy lifting for you. Now, the thing is, initially, you don't have the ability to inform or encode your unconscious or your subconscious, but you are capable of reprogramming your unconscious or your subconscious according to your own dictates of will through practice, meditation, mindfulness, whatever the fucking method it is you want to use. There's many different ways of impacting or affecting your unconscious. But in the West, man, motherfuckers don't have any, like the marketers and the advertisers understand human nature perfectly. Psychologists, I think, understand human nature better than most people. But like the average person on a day-to-day basis, man, they're not attending to the images that they view. They're not filtering or discerning or censoring what is coming into their awareness or their sphere of consciousness at all. They're just like letting it all hang in, or letting it all just come in and playing with their psyche in ways that they can't even safeguard against. Like, think about the shit that like you see on TV, like these kids are seeing in these movies and shit and woke television right now. It's some crazy shit. There's some crazy messages these kids
Disney
are getting, bro.
Plus been going ham the last 5 years, but go ahead.
I don't want to get too deep into it, but one of the things you got to understand, to me, this shit is like magic. You can be influenced in ways that you're not even aware of, and it takes people to point it out. Like, one of the things that recently Kanye West pointed out about Balenciaga was that they got like child bondage, like iconography built into their fucking advertising. What the fuck is that all about? What is the catalyst for this? Like, what is the meaning for this? Okay, and to me, it's like, how far can we go? How radical can we be? How far can we push the agenda until, like, cross-generational sex with minors is okay? How can we push the age of sexual, readiness lower and lower and lower? Okay? Now, I understand history's different. Like, the age of sexual readiness in Europe prior to, I think the mid 18th and the early 20th century was 14 for girls and boys. Like, if you're 14, you can fuck, you can fornicate, okay? But they raised that age higher, and I don't want to get into the reasons why at this moment. I'll go read Gail Rubin's paper about the sexual revolution again if you want me to. But, I mean, hey, psychological warfare is out there. The only fucked up thing is we're not playing it. We're not even involved in it. We ain't even trying to, like, it's like, what's the playing judo, like trying to wrestle with the opponent, and like you engaged in like, you know, like yin yang, push pull. We ain't even trying to push or pull.
No, we definitely getting subject to it though, and
Man,
having it normalized on a regular basis, not just as adults, but what's more critical is when we have the greatest level of neuroplasticity between the ages of 0 and 7. That's when we're getting indoctrinated with it even more so, and that
there it
makes it
goes.
pretty much permanent. Oh, you talking
Keto,
about
that's it. That's
like keto, yeah.
we not even play. Can you imagine like motherfuckers just programming you, and you're not even resisting against it at all? It's like, okay, whatever they do, we do. Whatever they say, whatever streaming influence they give us, we just run with it.
Well, look at
you
it
have
like
nothing,
this.
You have nothing culturally to combat it. Remember,
Right.
Remember when we say no one is more American than African Americans. So everything about the United States, whatever it cranks out and puts out, we are going to ingest it because we don't come from. So if I am Han Chinese, guess what? I come from thousands of years of legacy or whatever it is that I come from, right? So, you know, a lot of American ideas, at least for the first few generations, I'm not going to absorb them, right? If I'm coming from the Indus Valley civilization and I'm Baloch or I'm Sindhi, right? I come from traditions that are thousands of years old, fam. You know, whatever you cooked up, or you know what? When did we start this channel? Early 1800s, right?
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
early 1800s. So you're not going to have the same organization, nucleus, or performance as someone from Indus Valley civilization. What starts 8,000 years ago? How are you going to compete with that?
That's what we call cultural inertia, but it goes deeper than that because we've got a strong epigenetic imprint of the direction society as a whole is going. Because just like you said, everybody else is being brought up and introduced to the plantation model. We were literally the Darth Bane of the plantation model. You know, Batman, he embraced the darkness. You know, we were born in it, molded by it, and all that. That's the Ado social complex. And for as much as we tried to pull away, we have a cultural predisposition of that plantation model, of which the gynocracy is made possible as we understand it. And so with the general society moving in this gynocratic direction, you know, we're adopting it like a glove on a subconscious level. And all you have to do is go out and listen to what people are talking about at this point. You know, they are sounding more and more gynocratic by the day on a subconscious level, to where even demonizing anything associated with masculinity is on a cultural level contextualized as something negative that needs to be counterbalanced immediately, as though it's a disorder of some sort. You can just take a look at the psychology pamphlets that are coming out, the manuals that come out annually. I think it's the American Psychology Organization. I have to look that up later. The
American Psychological Association.
Yes. They print out manuals on a regular yearly basis. And you can just start tracking, you know, in the last 10 years, the way in which they used to address different psychological needs of boys and girls, and then healthy attributes of each gender, and how year by year, more of the masculine characteristics and traits of the male gender are seen as more and more problematic. And there's kind of like what we were describing earlier with how scientific racism was attributing white characteristics with positivity and black characteristics with negativity. The exact same kind of concept is taking place now with gender. And it's just interesting to observe that, because it's just like the frog in the pot, where it's slowly heating up a degree every single year. And until you take a step back and recognize that, you know, room temperature supposed to be 75 degrees and we're already at 100 plus and people are not saying anything about it. But folks are falling out wondering why. And they're saying, look, you're not outside. What's the problem? They've turned the heat up and no one's been paying attention.
So I want to respond to Chukwu Igwe. He says it's white supremacy to say that black Americans are uniquely lacking in agency and are uniquely gullible relative to other groups of people. What is there to be gained in thinking this way? Any responses to that? I mean, I got my own response, but I'm going to let y'all take it.
Again, this is a classic textbook example of status reports are not declarations of surrender, nor is it a kind of, you know, assertion of victimhood, as it's understood in the modern context, to say that the squeaky wheel still don't get no damn oil. It's squeaky because, it didn't man up enough. We're just describing a de facto condition of what's going on. I mean, the principles that we're discussing, we didn't come up with them. This is something that you can observe in the microbiota world. Your bacteria that are responsible for your gut biome function the same way that your neurology does, which functions the same way on the macro scale that various groups of people do. These are principles we're talking about and describing. We're not here saying that by virtue of being of the adosocial complex, you are incapable of insert adjective and verb. That's not what we're saying. What we're saying is, here is a unique trajectory of events that have taken place. Here's what has occurred in response to it all. Now, here's what's going on in the environment. And this is what you can do should you desire to problem solve, because now you know the origin, or at least have a better approximation of the symptoms and the potential origin that's causing those symptoms. It's unfortunate that when individuals of African descent have these conversations, to even describe the problem is instantly recontextualized as complaining. And I get a lot of people do, but it's because for the first time in a very long time, we're having the opportunity to collectively discuss our symptoms together. Because I don't know anybody that's ever gotten a diagnosis without having to describe the symptoms first and using that as a context for deeper investigation to get to the core to solve the problem. We're not here in the business of perpetuating symptoms or only talking about them forever. There is a desire and an objective animated by the spirit of problem solving in these conversations, not just here, but in the space in general, contrary to, again, popular belief and concept. But I want that understood. These are all tools. They are progress reports. They are data points to be used to solve problems on a baseline level, at least on an individual level, so that you can have agency to affect your immediate life, and then have an opportunity for that to spread to others who may not understand what's going on, because there's value in perspective.
But one of the issues I think that manifests from all of this is, like the ways in which people are supposed to compete. Like Sandow has a more exhaustive understanding of how warfare is conducted because he's actually engaged in warfare than the average individual who's never even been in the military or ever has served as an officer in the military. Because there's different levels of planning and strategic development for warfare at different levels, of hierarchy within the military itself. So like a private is going to have, or a sergeant is going to have a different understanding of the war effort and the enterprise related to war than, say, for example, somebody who's an officer. Okay, and not to say that the people don't understand it, like they're inferior. Okay, they just have a different rank and they're performing a different function than, say, for example, the officer corps. Okay, am I mistaken about this, Sandow?
No, not at all. Because Chuck will, Nameless and I had this conversation, right? To everything that you're saying. And I agree with you. For example, what I'm walking you through is how on a smaller scale, the military plans and how it thinks, right? So now when we get to paragraph 3, you're going to see courses of action, right? So you're going to see what's been done by the state and its actors and what's been done by us, right? And then it goes from there. So, for example, you'll look at African-American men. Okay, so we're in this condition called slavery. So you have people who escape for their freedom, right? Whether they head south or north. Then you have people who learn enough about the legal system, who challenge it legally through whatever loopholes in the laws that they can find. Then ultimately there's a civil war. Then ultimately these people or these men now run for political office, right? And so everyone has heard of Black Wall Street. And so you'll hear a lot of people say, we need to build, we need to have our own businesses. Well, we had that and it was destroyed, right? You know, we need to form these institutions. We have to do that. We have that and it was destroyed. And so what I believe is what you're left with in your frustration is that a lot of times we are identifying the problems, but leaving out what has been done against said problem and what needs to happen or what can we formulate to do with said problem, you know, in the future. But what happens is that I sent Nameless I sent Nameless a couple of days ago not a speech, but insight from General Petraeus, a very brilliant man. So he was over Operation Enduring Freedom in Afghanistan, and then later went on to become the head of the CIA, right? And Nameless, tell me if I'm right or wrong. When he was talking about the Ukraine, right, before you talked about the tanks and the guns and everything else, what was he talking about? The history.
Yep. He had to explain he had to contextualize everything that's there because environment plays such a huge role in how those assets play out. And I think you only understand that if you understand systems. And if you understand systems as they interplay on a greater level, and that's not even taking in consideration the human element to sometimes change things. You're still dealing with probabilities because there are options that were on the table that didn't get used because of the environment, followed by the actual mission at the time, which could differ at any moment. And any detail could have changed the context under which, or the tactics utilized on there. Because like you mentioned earlier, Sandog, most people, when they perform an understanding of systems, they only operate on a tactical level if they're subject matter experts in it. Generally speaking, they can contextualize the tactic, but they don't understand the tactic in conjunction with the general strategy, nor do they usually have that and combine it on the intel aspect that takes up the actual overwhelming majority of the resources. Meaning that when you actually get to the execution phase, that's 20% of the operation's actual effort. And the majority of it was spent on information and context.
Right. And one of the things people don't get, man, I mean, you know, they think that all you got to do is pick up some guns and shit and start shooting motherfuckers, and that's what war is. Like, you know, that's what it is. Just man the fuck up and just rebel or some shit like that. Like, dude, that's just asking to get fucking massacred.
If you understood how this is paragraph 1 with regards to operational readiness that Sandog's familiar with, but even when you get into the art of war, the very first thing they let you know is that nothing happens without information and the condition of the opponent. And you can't divine that from magic. You can't, you know, pull guesswork. You need eyes on the ground, which is why the art of war starts with that statement and understanding, and it ends in chapter 13 on the use of spies for that whole purpose.
But before BGS speaks, I want to say this shit, right? As far as I'm concerned, a lot of black men have to start a goddamn business model for overcoming whatever the fuck black people have been through in this country, right? So if you're born in the ghetto and, you know, your parents have a low income, what are you supposed to do? You're supposed to start a fucking business, right? You want to put an end to ghetto children born with low birth weights? Start a business. Suffer from a chronic physical or mental illness? Fuck it, start a business. You're disabled, got a drug or alcohol addiction? What's the remedy? Start a business. Or you're homeless, have inadequate shelter. Stop fucking around, be thrifty, and start a goddamn business. Or you're a high school dropout? Start a fucking business. Come from a dysfunctional family? Fuck it, start a business. Have a lack of healthy social ties and relationships? Fuck them people, just start you a business. Suffer from a lack of self-esteem? Fuck that shit, start you a business. Under or unemployed? Fuck it, bro, start a business. Got chronic fatigue? Start a business. High incarceration rates in your neighborhood? Fuck it. Start a business. Find it difficult to participate in public life? Fuck it, man. Just start a business. Now, how stupid does that shit sound, bro? Given the context of the multiple forms of malignancy that exist within our community, the solution is one prong, unidimensional. Solve is reductive, actually, okay? Start a business. It's fucking stupid. I understand we're supposed to be trying to be thrifty and industrious. Not saying we're not. But that's one component of resistance. It's not the whole fucking goddamn, solution to the puzzle. Like, I mean, imagine playing a chess game and you only got like one opening. And you only, no matter what the opposition does, how they respond to your opening, you just run your same play anyway. You're not even fucking responding to what your enemy is doing or your opponent is doing. It's stupid. It's unintelligent. It's ideological. It's fixated on one, ideal about how to actually succeed in American society and culture. And as Sandog just pointed out, we already did that shit. What's the use of building businesses and wealth if these motherfuckers, all they gotta do is say, I want that. That's like being in jail, nigga. You done hustled up, you done shined shoes and got your stamps and shit, or whatever your food is in your locker. You got all that, because you worked your ass off for a whole bunch of days and shit. Then here come Biff, or whatever the fuck, from the jail cell next to you. Like, hey, dog, let me get all that shit, bruh. Like, bruh, man, let me get one of them sandwiches. What the fuck you gonna do to maintain it? You ain't even thought on how to preserve it.
Fam, gynometry ain't caring about that. They take all functional vectors of productivity and multiply them by 0, and there you go. Followed by the universal axiom of 1% and 99% equal 50-50. Because you miss 100% of the shots you don't take.
I mean, to me, this is just, it's quixotic. It's a quick fix answer. It's like smelling snake oil. You understand what I'm saying? It's like telling people who are destitute and who are suffering from multiple forms of pathology to all of a sudden just fix their fucking problems by being industrious and starting businesses and shit. But we already know that statistically, what's the percentage of businesses that fail for anybody from any race that starts these motherfucking things? What,
over
80%?
80%. Over 80%.
80%,
Yep.
yeah.
So that's the solution. Just start some businesses and shit.
Like I said,
it's fucking ridiculous. And the people, the old money, the motherfuckers who started businesses for real, they started businesses through fucking threat, force, and fraud.
Yeah. Or
that's all business.
Or mostly luck.
There's such a thing as token action. And I think that's what gets prioritized, which is why I call it gynometry and multiplying by 0. Because it's not the actual number on the other side of the equal sign. It's how big of a number you can put on that effort value and productive value that you can then multiply by 0. Everybody ignores that end part, kind of like what 50 said. I watch gangster flicks and root for the bad guy and turn it off for it in because the bad guy die. Like, there you go. But go ahead, BG. I know BGS is up here.
Yeah,
BGS, go ahead.
The reason I, thank God people like Gigi and you and Nameless are here, right? And the reason that I attract people is because I'm not interested in the quick fix. I'm interested in the structure. How do we change the structure? How do we till the soil so that the seeds will grow, right? We're not, this is not the perishable soil. We're just willingly casting seeds out and the lucky ones actually sprout. We're trying to till the soil. We're trying to make the soil fertile for other people to actually grow their plants on. But you got to understand the soil and what it needs. It's the same thing with look at any systematic culture, right? We always basically navel gaze on the Black community and not looking at how other people actually succeeded, how other countries changed their structure, how other poor people rose up and actually began to succeed. We don't want to look at that. Anytime we start pointing that out, well, we talking about Black people. I said, dude, all people are the same, right? For the most part, right? So what can work, what other people have done can inform you what you should do. And that's what we don't do. You have to understand how this structure is actually built. Okay, what are the strong points? What are the weak links? And take as much advantage of those structures and those links as everybody else, as you can, because that's how people succeed. basically, look at the computer industry, right, or the IT, right? They took advantage of NASA. NASA came up with all this, all this free technology, right, and gave it out. So people just ran to NASA. What are you doing? What is the what's the research? And they turned it into a business. Intel came out of NASA, right? The thing is, you got to understand how this stuff is actually built, and it's structural. You cannot succeed in any business, any organization without understanding how the business runs, how the structure runs, and take advantage of the structure as it is. Because we're not going to build it from scratch. If we could do that, we'd have done it. United States wasn't built from scratch. It's built off of something else. The whole, as China, as it's constituted today, it's constituted from a 200-year-old plan. We're going to take advantage of what the Westerners are doing. We're going to learn everything we can and copy them and use whatever tools they have to actually succeed. But you have to understand it. They studied for 150 years before they actually came out. Okay.
And but
Go ahead.
one of the problems I have with black folks is that we're purely reactive.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I mean, and the reason why we're reactive is because we can never get our bearings straight. It's like, you've been in the ring. Have you ever boxed a motherfucker and that nigga knocked your ass in the head? Soon as it's like 30 ticks on the clock.
Right.
Your head get your bell is wrong. So you spending the entire time just trying to stand on your feet. Mm-hmm. You can't implement an offensive because you're purely in a defensive reactive mode.
Yeah.
Okay, now I'm not saying that business should not be engaged in or there shouldn't be a black business class. That's not what I'm saying. But it can't, everything that the strategy that blacks employ cannot be reductive to a business. It can't be reductive to everybody is seeking to do the exact, even in an organism, every cell does not do the same fucking thing.
Everybody wants to repeat the Atlanta Compromise, right? The same thing over and over again. If you work hard enough, then they will eventually accept you and you succeed. That shit didn't work back then, right? Tulsa, Black Wall Street was an example of why it doesn't work. Okay, you had nothing to protect. You had no societal insurance to actually keep them from burning down what you built. That's one of the reasons why. That's what Du Bois is trying to tell you. I don't care how much you build. Okay, if you ain't got no societal protection, it's for naught. That's what he's trying to say. You need both. Not
exactly.
One or the other.
So
you need both.
They were both right. They were both right. Okay.
Both right. Yeah.
So, but the point is, Booker T. Washington wanted all these goddamn businesses and thrift to take place. Yeah. But white people could take it any fucking given moment because you're not even a human being. You don't have any rights that these people are bound to reserve to preserve.
Or they can, or whatever money flows that you have coming in and out, they can shut that off. Okay.
As we saw with Kanye. Go ahead.
Yeah.
I mean, that's facts, though.
It is facts, right? That's the whole thing. They control the means of production, the means of flow, the means of commerce. You not control that, right? Black folks think that you control it's the level playing field, and it is not. You got to work within it. They, look at the farmers, right? They should get the same loans, the same access to wealth, the same contracts, the same everything, right? Do they get it? No. FDA says, well, white farmers said, no, you can't have it. You can't have access to, to FDA loans and all that kind of stuff. They shut that off, right? You black, you got to jump through 15 different hoops to actually get the same thing the white man just walks into the office and gets. That's an unfair advantage. King was trying to tell you that back in the 1960s, right? It's structure that counts. We're trying to change the structure, okay? Moynihan and Clark were trying to tell you, fine, you can work as hard as you want. We have to change the underlying structure so that we will have a fair shot at what you want. We don't have a fair shot.
Chinese, here's the deal. So look, here's the thing, right? I want to respond to the truth as I know it, okay? Here's the fucking deal, man. These people are playing a strategy. We're reactive. They already have like some shit called, what do they call it? Counterinsurgency measures and shit. Like they got books written on this shit, bro. They send motherfuckers to West Point, Annapolis. They got military schools. Where they teach motherfucking people who are becoming officers, right? Like the noble portion of the military. Where they are teaching motherfuckers, literally, teaching them how to engage in not just material conventional warfare, but how to fucking play mind games, war games. And all we sitting back and doing is talking about starting some fucking businesses. Now, I have no problem with Negroes having businesses, bro. I don't. That's not the issue here, man. All I'm saying is, first of all, we can start reading what they wrote on how to conduct counterinsurgency measures to begin with, or side ops. The shit is public knowledge and information. We don't even do that shit. Because one thing that niggas don't do, I don't give a fuck if they even intelligent, graduated from school, half of the motherfuckers that got PhDs, them motherfuckers still ain't reading.
No, they're not. They're
not reading a goddamn thing, bro.
I want to answer this real quick, right? Because this is something, believe it or not, the wealthiest black man in the United States said the exact same thing we're saying, right? Smith said the exact same thing. The difference between you and everybody else is they have access to wealth that you don't, right? A white woman, a black woman has access to loans, preferred contracts, all this other stuff that can make you wealthy as a business, right? You do not. You don't have the same access to wealth that she does, especially the white woman, right? White woman's at the top of the totem pole as far as access to wealth, loans, access to funds where she can actually start her business and start it up. Amazon is a perfect example. Amazon, Intel, Apple all had access to wealth, access to funds, VC startup funds. They didn't come out of nowhere. Okay, you do not. You do not. So you're like 3 steps behind them before you even start. Okay, you have to change the fundamental structure to make it fair. Okay, go back and look at what Robert Smith said in when he actually talked to. I might even clip that out. What he said to the Earn at Your Leisure. He said, "You guys could be one of the biggest YouTube channels, big businesses on the planet if you had access to what? Access to wealth, access to funds, access to finances, which they do not." He said that. He's worth $11 billion. He knows what he's talking about because he does this on a consistent basis. Okay. It's not a level playing field. Stop pretending like it is. When you just start a business, 85% of black businesses fail, including females, right? Because you don't have access to what? You can't walk in a bank. You don't have access to capital. This is a country based on what? Capitalism.
But they just gave like the Homestead Act just gave white immigrants. They was like, "Fuck it, you got to settle this land. We giving you this motherfucker. Yes. We gonna open it up." Like that's how they got their bread. Now black people did to a certain extent, like to even form. Like in Texas, blacks had like oil rigs and shit like that. They were discovering oil in various places. White people was like, "Fuck that shit. I want that." That's like, have you ever been shook down in the hood?
Yeah.
As a young boy or some shit like that?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Like, I done been robbed for my bicycle, motherfucker. Come up to me with a knife. I'm fucking 9 years old. This nigga got to at least be 16. I'm like, God damn, I got for my bike. You ever been shook down at the swimming pool? Like, where I'm from, nigga, Northside St. Louis, Kossuth and Fair, motherfucker. Fairground Park is the swimming pool we used to go to. Don't go there with no brand new fucking tennis shoes, motherfucker. Even if they Chuck Taylors, if they clean and they white, you ain't gonna leave the motherfucking pool with them if, you know what I'm saying, some poor broke ass Negro there and he gonna shake your ass down when you ain't looking. Yeah. It is what it is. So they'll run your shit too. These white people will run your shit.
Yeah, I don't mind people disagreeing, but thing is, if you're gonna disagree, do some fucking work, man. Don't just come up here just rattling off at the mouth. Show me something. Show your work. Prove your point. Don't just come. Well, we can't start a business. Black businesses can't be started. Yeah, they can be started. Go deeper than it. Don't come up here with a PhD rattling off something that a third grader actually came up and can get out of a book. Come on, man.
The issue, BGS, is this, right? When people, the whole thing about starting a business, right? That's one thing. But remember, I want to say this, right? Because again, my degree is in finance and my focus is on merger and acquisition, right? And corporate valuations. So when you're talking about starting a business, especially for most African Americans, initially you might be talking to sole proprietorship.
Yeah.
And a sole proprietorship,
Within
especially
black in a black neighborhood, we call it hustle. But go ahead.
exactly. So a
Hmm.
sole proprietorship within within a black neighborhood, right? You don't have the access to money like BG has said, because when you're talking about in the micro, not macro, you're talking about corporations,
Hmm.
right? So you're
Hmm.
talking about corporations. Some of them are private and some of them are public. So
Right.
for most African Americans, what we're gonna have at most is either a sole proprietorship or some level of partnership, right? Many of us might go out there, get a license and put LLC on it or whatever the
Hmm.
case might be, but not a lot of us have the money to truly incorporate.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, they could do simple things like, okay, I'm in California, right? And you
Yeah,
have a lot of blue collar dudes, man, that have training, and they get well, not even contracts. They sometimes they go from door to door. That's how they make their hustle, make their living, right?
yeah,
And as long as it's a closed system, a fair system, they make 100 G's, they make over 100 G's, right? Okay. You say, well, nothing they can do to actually undercut them. Once you start importing Central Americans and Mexicans into the will actually undercut you by what 60% okay, how are you going to compete against it? And they have laborers that are cheap, so you have, instead of one or two black guys working on your house, you can have what, 10 Mexicans working on your house or 10 Guatemalans working on your house for half the rate. How are you going to compete against that? Just
correct.
by allowing illegals into the country, which
Correct.
you have no
And,
control over.
yeah,
That's policy. Go ahead.
yeah. But no, again, BGS, again, off, like I said, off to your point, or when
Hmm.
you get to places like LA and New York that
Hmm.
are highly bureaucratic, right? So if you have your little side hustle, right,
Hmm.
like what BGS is telling you, or you have your business, and let's say Sandog is some powerful white guy,
Hmm.
and I don't like the fact that you're cutting into my business, man, I could go to my labor union and shut you down. And
Right.
then I could do something as simple as, well, where's your class 33.5 something class,
Yeah.
certification. So this, that, because remember, again, on the racist tip, and this is what I'm trying to show you guys and what BGS is saying. So on the racist tip, a lot of these certifications that unions came out with was
Right.
all about pushing you out.
Yes. Yeah.
So
Clark talked about that, man, back in 1965. It's actually in his book about
okay, yeah.
white unions. Yeah, Clark talked about that. It's not new.
It's not, yeah. Just off the strength, just off the strength that I have a business and I have lawyers and knowledge of the law,
Hmm.
right? I could shut down. I could shut down your sole proprietorship or your partnership again, like I said, just like that.
Hmm.
So, and this is what we're talking about, guys. We're talking about institutions and systems. I kind of wish like DC was here too, but you're talking about institutions and systems, and it's not just as simple as you calling on the powers of Grayskull and punching somebody in the face, and it all comes down,
Yeah.
right? All of this stuff is interconnected. So like I just want to tell you guys, like for example, for me, my last assignment in the Army, right? I was in something called Coalition Forces Land Component Command, right? I worked for the general. I was on his staff, right? And so what this is that uh, command or joint task force can have components from all service components, right? Army, land, sea, air, and marine, right? Thus, a land component, which I was, is a command directing all land forces on behalf of a combatant commander or joint task force commander, right? Coalition or sometimes combined means armed services of different countries are involved. Thus, a coalition forces land component command is a multinational force, right?
Hmm.
So this is my last thing. So when I left, right, this consisted of First Marine Expeditionary Force, Third Marine Aircraft Wing, First Marine Logistics Group, 5 Corps, U.S. Army, right? And I'll get into that. And that had the British 1st Armored Division, the 3rd Infantry Division, 101st Airborne, 2nd Brigade, 4th ID, and a whole bunch of other people, right? And so when I was working for the general, I was helping him manage this across 25 countries, right? So the U.S. government splits Americans' armed forces into commands, right? So CENTCOM is the Middle East, AFRICOM is Africa, SOUTHCOM is South America, NORTHCOM, where you guys are now, again, so on and so forth. So this will be like at the Army level, right? So when you're a young officer, you're taught to think 2 levels up. So Lieutenant Sandog went from troop to squadron, right? Then once I made captain, I went from troop to brigade, right? And so now, okay, I go to my Army captain school, and now by leaps and bounds, I'm sitting on the Army level staff looking at all of this stuff. And so what I'm telling you is that, so even for me, I can not only can I plan a war, I can actually plan a campaign, which are very different things. And so, like I said, once we get into part 3 of this, and shout out to BGS for coming up, and that guy asking the question, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna split this between state and non-state actors, because all of this exists in warfare. And so when you talk about improving the condition of Black people, and I get it, right? You have this part where you're frustrated and you just want to pick up a rifle and do something, right?
Yeah, you have high level economic warfare going on right now under
Correct.
everybody's nose, and nobody's freaking talking about it. You ain't got to start a business. Shut up. And read the goddamn room.
But that's just
I'm sick of these people. Shut up and read the goddamn room and listen for a chance.
You know what? I'm glad I'm up here.
Hold on. Go ahead, Sandor.
I'll just say, please don't turn into COVID BGS.
No, I'm not.
With the tracking systems. That's why I said
I'm not. I'm not gonna go that deep. I'm just saying. Smell the coffee.
Yeah, but what I promise to do, BGS, is that I'll talk about this on the execution part of it. I'll talk about it from both a state and non-state thing in terms of how institutional and structural racism works, man. And sad and most unfortunately, this isn't something that you can't just punch in the face, man. This is a well-oiled machine. Because remember when I talked to you guys before, right? How you have institutions, and a series of institutions now become a machine.
Yeah.
Right?
A lot of it is being automated.
Yeah. Charles, go ahead and get in. Charles wants to get in.
Yeah, go ahead, fam.
It's something that you said about a business.
I'm
not an expert about it, but I'm going to tell you what's funny about business. Because not too long ago, I had to go through a program for veterans that had businesses. And it was this white lady. When I had the whole presentation, I got to send you the PowerPoint. And she says, my God. And I told her straight up, this can actually help a lot of young Black men who need careers. You know what she did? She closed the door. We were at the center. She closed the door. And she's like, look, I got 2 Black sons. This is a white woman. This is what you need to do. ... And the one thing she said that I knew years ago, because a black major once told me, a white man with a GED is better off than a Black man with a master's.
Yep.
This country.
Still today. Yeah.
Because he has access to capital. That same little junky looking white boy, if you put him in a suit, clean him up, we'll get that capital.
Yeah.
Do you know how many fucking times I have to kick over the chair and use my veteran's status, well, now disabled veteran status, and on the second, I'm going to register myself to be one of those disabled veteran business owners where the government has to give me a certain amount of their contracts. But how many years niggas told me, yeah, don't tell Black boys go to the military.
Yeah.
I mean,
that's our women speaking. We listen way too much to our women. But go ahead.
We do, and it's funny, right? because so many people out there think it's so easy to start a business. And I'm gonna tell you, my business, where you have to deal with weapons, most motherfuckers can't even afford the insurance per month.
Mm-hmm.
Hold on. Let me do this though.
Go ahead.
So look, a black business in Texas, the Turkey Leg Hut, which I've been to, got fire ass turkey legs.
Mm-hmm.
They put macaroni and cheese inside the motherfucking turkey leg. You hear me? Anyway.
Wait, shit. But go ahead.
Man, that motherfucker, it is what it is. So it's under assault by the establishment right now. Now, I don't know what this is surrounding. I don't have, he says they even got a Jezebel doing a nude protest there.
Yeah.
Now, and it's a black-owned business. So the question is, so you know what? A nigga will protest another nigga's business, but they won't protest these crackers' business. That's the shit they won't protest these motherfucking, these nail shops and shit. And these hairdressers and shit, they be, hurry up and buy. Them motherfuckers, the bitches will go in there and get that shit, that creamy crack, and be at that motherfucker all day long. Get cursed out, them bitches. Remember that one time them guys, man, basically stood up for them black chicks, man, in that motherfucking the nail shop? Yeah. Guess what? Them bitches was lined up at that motherfucker.
Yeah.
The next motherfucking goddamn 2 or 3 days, they was lined up at that bitch to go right back in there.
The irony is he got arrested by the black women that showed up on the scene, which was interesting.
Yeah.
But one thing I want to say about, this whole understanding of looking at the bigger picture. Someone mentioned the military. We make up probably less than 1%. Less than 1% of the U.S. population in general is even participating in the military. But relative to our actual numbers, there's more black folks that are participating in the armed forces than any other group relative to our population numbers.
Right.
When you look at the number one employer for the ADO social complex, it's freaking Walmart. Walmart. Like, there's another point, before we even get to the business, we have to look at gainful employment in general. And one thing that white dude with the GED gets access to on a baseline level and anybody up here can probably say the same thing, is access to networking. Damn the capital. It's not even about the capital. It's the freedom of movement you have to getting access to networks of people who have assets that can put you on to things. I can tell you right now, the majority of my progress, because I'm one of the large portions of the African-American demographic that works for the federal government. The majority of my progress didn't come from my end of the year reviews, which I made sure to get perfect scores in. It didn't come from my work ethic that constantly gets cited over and over and over again by people. It boiled down to the fact that I had to play the political backdoor game and know people who knew people. And it was strictly off the strength of who I knew that I found out about windows of opportunity to get promoted that were made available. And even if they do get put on usajobs.gov, oftentimes that's nothing more than we call it kagebushin. It's a subterfuge to prop up a false opening because they already have somebody in mind that they want to hire. And so they do that to circumvent the legal defense that somebody could make to say that, you did this in hiring preference nonsense and you didn't give people the opportunity to get the job. If I didn't know people that knew people and built the networks that were required to make that happen, I couldn't even get the modicum of advancement I did. And I am a vet. I did have a top security clearance with the job I had when I was in the Air Force. I had all of those preferences and I still didn't have a network. And I could take somebody that came off right out of high school doing the same thing I did. And the only difference between me and them was either our gender or our race. And they did not have to go through the same levels of extraness to get a lot of these same promotions, because a lot of them are my supervisors.
And a billionaire said the exact same thing that you're saying. That's like he had to leave where he was because he wasn't allowed those networks to start his own.
But there's no amount. The last thing I'm gonna say, this is just no amount of multiplying by 0, you can do to get that. That is the difference between why I always talk about the difference between force, which we have, and power, which is what institutions provide. It's not a lack of effort. It's not, you haven't cultivated enough grit or that you're weak.
Mm-hmm.
You need the ability to multiply your force rather than add it, and that's the difference.
And we got to that's what we're saying about having people go to school and get into these professions, because we need as many spooks that sit next to the door as we can. So when we come to that knock on the door, he can put his foot in it, so we can actually get into the room. That's what we need.
So the one thing I wanted to say was there's a scholar who many would deem to be conservative to a certain extent. His name is Orlando Patterson.
Mm-hmm.
He makes the entire argument related to black folks and their lack of ability to take advantage of opportunity as a failing for them to be able to take advantage of networks. Like, networks are the thing that get people hired, especially white people. Like, your fucking daddy works at the firm, so his sons can work at the firm if they desire, or his brother, or his extended family, like his nephews or his nieces. You know what I'm saying? And it's just more of them that have access to networks than us.
Yeah,
it's just the facts. You know what I'm saying? And it is the case. I have been hired by jobs internally. And one could argue, the motherfuckers knew they was going to give me the job before all the other I'm not going to, let me not even say some shit like that, because the motherfucker might be listening to this, and then somebody might come up from the past and then try to fucking, sue some people or some shit.
You were the leading candidate before, knowing
if a motherfucker asks you to apply, and they're like, and it doesn't guarantee you're going to get it, okay?
Yeah.
But if they ask you to apply for the position,
you got a leg up.
You can be, unless you fuck it up, you pretty much got a good chance of getting the job. Okay?
Right. Yeah.
But it all depends on, a variety of factors, like when it comes to academia and other kind of jobs, man. Like academia.
And we need a bomb on
this.
this.
It's ridiculous, the level of scrutiny that you have to go through in order to get a job.
And we need a bomb on that super chat, though.
Yeah. Oh, hell yeah, man. You know what? Fuck, I'm tripping, man. Mississippi Delta guy. No, he ain't gonna get no bomb. I'm about to get this motherfucker some fanfare. Fuck that. He about to get some horns and shit going like he's some sort of medieval fucking king or some shit. Yeah, he got to get the Grey Poupon treatment right there.
You ain't shit, but
does anybody have some Grey Poupon? No. But yeah, shout out to Mississippi Delta guy, man, for that. I assume that's what that means, Mississippi Delta guy. You know what I'm saying? That's what I assume it means. But if I'm wrong...
he's right. You're right. That's what he means, yeah.
Yeah, so, I mean, ultimately, it's many ways to fight this war, but you can't fight it in one way. It's like, put it this way, like say, for example, you're in a boxing ring, right? And the sweet science of pugilism, right? You gotta fucking have combos, and you gotta feint, and you gotta have defense and offense. And I mean, of course, you can hit a motherfucker with a lucky punch, but what we talking about ain't even analogous to just one man fighting one man. We're talking about an entire system. Like this shit, like America's is organized more than even Rome was, bro.
Yes, much more. Yeah.
This shit is like, imagine going to war with Rome. But you know what the ironic thing is, though? Rome eventually fell. And one of the reasons that it fell was that the Germanic tribes were interpolated into the fucking Roman military.
Yeah.
And what did they do? All you got to do is look at they got documentaries on this shit, reenactments, the whole nine. Okay? These Germanic tribes, man, were like, okay, you know what? We're going to learn their military tactics. We're going to learn how they run phalanxes and shit like this. And they did.
Yep.
And some of them defected absolutely and totally. And were detractors of their own culture and, became romanticized, so to speak. They became Roman. It happened quite often. But there was a contingent of Germanic tribes that were like, okay, we're going to take this information and use it over a protracted period of time to fight back when there's a vulnerability or a chink in their motherfucking defenses.
Right. I mean, Rome got it from the Phoenicians. They took the tactics from Hittites and the Greeks and the Phoenicians and combined it into what we call Rome as far as the fighting force. They took technology from elsewhere, and that's the way it works. It always goes. That's what Quigley said. It always goes from the center outward. All these techniques and knowledge and all kind of stuff get diffused outward, and so at one point it's going to take you over. That's what happens.
But here's the thing, though. Like, and it's this. I know I ain't supposed to be talking about bitches and shit like that.
Go ahead, man. Well, this is the manosphere. Bitches are always on the menu.
The one thing that you hear, man, women talk about when it comes to forming families. Do you ever hear them talk about legacy?
Not really, for the most part.
Do you ever hear them talk about what the fuck their family is going to be like 5 to 6 generations in the future? And what they want the world to appear to be, or what they want the world to look like 4 or 5 generations from now?
We hear this goofy empire talk. At least on IG, I hear him say it.
You're talking about the TV show or what?
I'm gonna build my empire. I need somebody to build an empire with.
Well, for me, they want to rule over it. Something for them to rule over.
Yeah. Oh man.
But I mean, that's that. Okay, so
don't answer that, Gigi. I was trolling.
I'm gonna have a condo type of shit. Like that's some bullshit right there. I'm talking about. Like legacy to me is building over a period of time family wealth. Like you want to be like the Rockefellers, or you want to be like the motherfucking, the Vanderbilts or the Carnegies or some shit like that.
Yeah. What did they say about it?
You don't hear these chicks talking about no shit like that. They want a nigga with the money, with the bag, so they can go on motherfucking trips now.
Yeah. Well, you know what they say about a man? He's gonna plant a tree whose shade he will never enjoy. That's what man does. Women don't do that. They look for shade.
Unfortunately, I think it's about time we start looking for some goddamn shade. So,
well, that's why niggas is going overseas.
Yep.
I mean, no disrespect to the ladies here, man, but okay, I'm gonna do a show tomorrow on this shit. But niggas is banning women in the United States because one, niggas don't like bitches who are adulterous and narcissistic.
Wait a minute, PhD. From your expert analysis,
put some spec on this man, PhD motherfucker to you.
PhD motherfucker, sir. PhD squire motherfucker, sir. Yes. From one PhD to another, because I got my second PhD. The first one's in bitch babble. The other one is protecting niggas' ass.
There you go.
So basically, from your expert analysis, niggas don't like bitches that act like bitches.
Well, bitches. So ban is an acronym that can take on a wide variety of characteristics. It could be niggas don't like bombastic, arrogant niggas. It could be a whole bunch of shit. You can just put in a term there. Bitches who are adulterous and narcissistic. It could be a whole bunch of. You find some terms. My whole viewpoint on it is, look, and I'm not gonna go. I don't want to get into passport bros totally here, but this is a shadow, a sliver, like a foreshadowing, right? There's a reason why in the Bible, and you can say fuck the metaphysics of the Bible or whatever the case may be, but there is a portion of the Bible that says it's better to live on the corner of a roof than in a house with a fucking quarrelsome woman. Okay? What if your whole culture is filled with quarrelsome women?
Yep.
Why the fuck would you deal with that? Like, if your job is to create a problem for me and to tell me how fucked up your life is related to me every day, all fucking day, you gotta remind me, like, or the most simplistic, stupid shit in the world that you upset about. Now you're gonna start playing passive aggressive games, pussy games, all kind of fucking violent games, cursing motherfuckers out games. I'm not listening to you. Got my finger in the ear, stonewalling games. Who wants to deal with that shit, bro? We supposed to, like, a woman and a man, if they can get along, they're supposed to relate to each other. We have a problem with relating. And all relating is lateral is the root word of relation. Lateral, meaning side by side. Reattaching to each other side by side again and again. Like, we can't even do that shit. Okay? Then not only that, you got women right now, man, who basically, they have subscribed to the whole notion that they could be dudes. So they fucking having meaningless relationships with dudes over a time that takes a toll. Then that adds to the bitchiness and the disgruntledness with men in general. Okay? Now you got problems with dudes in general. And sex is a game. And everything is transactional, and it's all about manipulation and control. Mm-hmm. And trying to get niggas to trick and shit like this.
Yeah.
Who wants to be involved with that, man?
Yeah.
Nobody wants to be involved with somebody cantankerous as hell, manipulative as hell, and you can't tell them shit. Because everything is couched in terms of, you's a fucked up ass nigga. There's something fucked up about you. Now you got niggas saying, echoing this shit. Mm-hmm. Which is even worse. I understand that women go through a lot of shit and the world is fucked up and, you know, they got their issues or whatever. But goddamn, bro. Niggas don't want to have to deal with a war field, a battle zone, when they come home for their peace, man. Niggas don't want to deal with that shit. From a chick that's already been dug out by a hell of niggas. And then they got to pick up that baggage and still deal with your attitude. Because half of these motherfucking chicks out here already been knocked up 2-3 times.
Yep.
But they still better than you. They still got an attitude. Even if you try to wife one of them bitches up, they got an attitude. And I blame it on niggas themselves, though, because niggas will put up with anything. Niggas is hounds for the pussy. They'll do anything for these chicks out here, except any kind of treatment and conditions. There's always some sucker-ass nigga trying to fill your space over some bullshit, trying to take on this raggedy-ass motherfucker here on the same bullshit. But by the time that nigga knock her ass down, he gonna move on to the next bitch. You stupid chick, you trying to play hypergamy games, then you end up fucking ass out anyway.
Meanwhile, her beta male provider list is getting longer and longer and longer. And those kids that came about as a result of that end up seeing that as the norm. So either they develop a psychological complex where they're trying to vicariously please their mom through perpetuating this concept, or they end up becoming the very thing that caused the cycle to start in the first place. Meaning, at the end of the day, really, all you can do is accept the environment for what it is, draw your line in the sand, make your demands, and if they're not willing to adhere towards that, and if you can't create an environment within your own volition that can help facilitate that, you got to go elsewhere. But at the end of the day, we need to know that that's also a ticking time bomb, because so much of that has been influenced by modern technology and the first industrial wave. So much so that the fourth industrial wave coming in the wake of intersectional feminism and all this other nonsense that's coming along, they're starting to change as well. It's just going to be a question of how deep is the cultural inertia in the environment that you find yourselves in, and how long does that particular culture that you find yourself surrounded in willing to make compromises of these technological advances at the expense of their cultural and social erosion with regards to their ability to form relationships long-term in the institution of family. And I don't see people talking about that enough, not in any cohesive way. I think it's going under the radar. It goes back to what you asked earlier, Gigi. How many people have 5-year plans, let alone 5 generational plans?
Man,
No one's thinking long term like that.
Man, it's all up. Man, these hoes is in winter mode. You know what it is. You know what it is. Winter coming. They deal with shit in seasons. Motherfucker, these chicks is not thinking past seasons, my nigga. I'm talking about 3-month intervals. It's cuffing season. It's, hot girl summer. It's fuck nigga free year or some shit like that. It ain't got nothing to do with no long-term nothing. And if a nigga trying to have a family, that's a 30, 40-year plan. Minimum.
I got a slight objection to my boy Nameless.
But hold on, before you do that, my nigga drinking liquor, smoking cigars, I gotta give him a shout out. None other than the nigga, the officer of the goddamn law himself, Charles Faulkner Jr. with the $50 donation. Appreciate you, sir. You know that. And also, before I even move forward, that motherfucker that comes around during Christmas.
Motherfucking Grinch.
The cantankerous individual, gotta give him a shout out to.
Shout out to the motherfucking Grinch.
To the motherfucking Grinch. You gotta
hit Grinch with them Gregorian chants, man.
Yo.
He killing me with that shit, dog.
That's the sound that every nigga should wake up in the morning and go take a piss.
Yo.
Shit, that just motivates you in life, man.
I don't know how we're going to do it, but Grinch, if you ever make a stop to UAE, man, we have to get up, man. We have to get up, man. If the Grinch stop, if you're stopping around this way, and I just have a question, for BGS in the chat. I want to know who's the man sitting next to the man, sitting next to the man, sitting next to the goddamn man that called my PhD a motherfucker.
Well, the question is, who called that motherfucker PhD?
Right, that's crazy. There you go.
That shit was hilarious. Go ahead, Phil.
Where I got a slight disagreement. And the only part where I have a slight disagreement is that the beta male orbiters are running low. I mean, that shit like petrol right now.
They got their passports.
Here's what's happening. A lot of them are actually going alphabetized. And I mean on some Transformer shit now. Actually, that's a video I'm waiting to do. I sent you that article, Sand Dog. I still got to chop that up. I don't see too many people talking about it.
But dog, I already did it, Nameless. It's called Transmaxing. I read they fucking
Oh, did you?
manifesto.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying?
Go
So
ahead,
the whole point is, bruh, Transmaxing. I didn't call it that. I ain't put it out there like that because I already know how they deal with my content. Motherfucker, I still have community strikes from fucking a year and a half ago. So my channel is on shadow ban status forever. Every time I put out a video, the motherfuckers like, we need to review this. You know what I'm saying? It just is what it is. I ain't mad about it. I just know how I got to deal with the whole circumstance. Then you got that church nigga who came out and said some ignorant shit about Kevin Samuels. That motherfucker put a community strike on me because I asked the question, is his apology sincere or not? That motherfucker, I did that shit down there 2 years ago.
Well, they saw
a year and a half ago. This motherfucker done.
Oh, you talking about that mother?
The Kappa dude, man. The Kappa nigga.
You know where that motherfucker's from.
Yeah. You got to remember, it's not your channel, Charles. Got to chill out.
I know. You know where.
No, he can say what he want to say. No, I mean, like tonight, I ain't even trying to monetize this motherfucker, but to me. Bruh, all it was a question. The clip was like a minute and 15 seconds long. Okay, I got, the nigga could have emailed me like, bro, could you take that down or anything? But niggas, they really actually, like, I have never put a strike on nobody's channel. I ain't never flagged nobody's shit. Nothing. I ain't even commenting on your shit if I don't like it. Or I might comment on it as a joke, but I'm moving on. I ain't gonna sit there and say stuck on no niggas channel and try to fuck with their channel. You know what I'm saying? Like, for what? But this is the sort of shit bitch niggas do. Niggas start flagging each other's channels and shit like that. Or trying to besmirch niggas' reputations and shit.
On behalf
That's some bitch shit to me, man.
on behalf of Baltimore, we apologize for that dumbass nigga.
Ain't nothing but Tuesday in the gunocracy, sir.
And
I was gonna say, man, this shit go back. But the only reason why I brought up that whole alphabet thing is because of, I made mention of that when I broke down my hive theory. And there was a lot of evidence of that going down. I just didn't expect them to come out with a manifesto, no pun intended, to really start putting that front and center. But it's interesting. It's generally what I'm sensing is a kind of schism occurring in the alphabet movement where the L in that movement is going in one direction and they want to try to hyper focus their own political power because they're about to get replaced by the transhumanist movement. And I think it's interesting watching this play out in the long run through automation, number one, and the kind of laws that piggybacked from the usurpation of Title VII to the creation of intersectional feminism, to the onset of the T movement, I guess we can call it the Decepticon movement, and to what we're seeing with this transhumanist understanding socially of what it means to even be human, let alone how relationships with regards to being human are going to look like, because they're not going to be happy when they see artificial wombs, AI, people dating the AI, and folks procreating without the use of traditional family models that don't require a female, which we will probably see this before that 5 generational point you're talking about, Gigi. And the culture's not prepared to deal with these changes. And they're already laying out the groundwork for it with these goofy arguments, going on social media, making these ridiculous expectations of what a human being's supposed to look like. And I'm not even going to get into the weave and filter conversation, but it's all lining this up because it's socially calibrating people to get set up for all of this in the long run. No one, again, is talking about it, but it's going to have its consequences either way.
If you motherfuckers don't think, if you came up with this shit by yourself, Nameless, just because you saw a trend, you're a fucking genius, which I assume that you are. You know what I'm saying? But here's the reality of this shit. I'm just going to show you. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this bullshit. Can you see that? This
I think you got to zoom in a little.
Trans-maxing manifesto, my nigga.
Are you
No bullshit, right? So now they telling incels, this is what incels are turning to. There are many potential benefits from transitioning from male to female. I'm not going, here's the 17 shit points. Sexual excitement from having a feminine body.
Oh, gosh.
The superiority of female aesthetics, meaning women look better than dudes, okay? Which I tend to agree with. But anyway, access to transbian dating pool. Meaning, so now they don't have to just fuck girls, they can fuck anybody who's trans. You know what I'm saying?
Okay.
Full body orgasms. Now we talking about incel, people can't get pussy anyway, right? Full body orgasms.
Okay.
Multiple orgasms from penile stimulation. I assume that means anal penetration. Okay.
Okay. I'm not going to.
You will feel emotions stronger and be happier on estrogen. You ever seen a happy ass chick, man?
Wait a minute. They make those?
Your breasts will become sensitive. Like, okay, nigga, that's some shit that you like. Being able to attract cis lesbians, which, I guess, that could be cool, I guess.
A cis lesbian.
It's a thing.
A lesbian who's a woman who operates as a lesbian.
Oh, okay.
So a freaky a lesbian bitch who likes women.
Right.
Okay.
But she operates as a woman though.
Your gender's 33 different types of gay.
She ain't butch. She ain't a butch. She a lesbian bitch that ain't butch.
Oh, she a lipstick lesbian. Okay.
Right.
Okay.
Being able to attract high quality males for sex. So they like, fuck it, we get the whole sexual fucking marketplace out there.
Okay.
But here's the thing, Gigi, and the reason why I brought that up when I talked about my hive theory is because I already pointed out how this occurred in nature. When you look at the consequences of what was boiling down in the die-off phase of the mouse utopia experiment. And that's why I led my hive theory with Dr. John Calhoun's work, because it's creating the same cultural algorithm. It's like clockwork. The same things that you're expecting, where you saw males behaving as females and attempting to attract the attention of other dominant males, all in the context of wanting to procreate, knowing that's not going to work. But the thing was, you also saw females doing the exact same thing. Again, all of this is straight up recorded, copy and paste in these experiments, repeated over and over and over again. And I'm shocked at how many people either dismiss these experiments or look at them as though they're science fiction. It blows my mind.
Somebody need to do a goddamn, like a movie about this shit. But you know what?
They did 2 of them. The mouse of Nim or whatever, and then all the stuff that the mice of Nim was based off of, that was predicated on the mouse utopia experiments.
Yeah, I gotta see that shit then. Give me the links to them. I know you the link doctor. If anybody's a doctor, it's you, the link doctor. Know what I'm saying? So yeah, throw me some links to them flicks, or at least the names or the titles, so I can go and do the research and look at the shit myself. But yeah. I think like even the feminists, the androgynous feminists, Camille Paglia talked about this shit. She was like, motherfucker, when you see men start to become wet noodles and shit like that, and everything becomes, forward, and everybody's so libertine and shit like that, she's like, that's evidence that society has reached a late stage and is bordering on decline. You know what I'm saying? Like, I mean, because all the males used to be, robust, and they were manly and virile, and then all of a sudden they become more feminine and shit like this. That's how you know that you're at a stage of decline in your culture or civilization. At least that's what she says. All right? Now, but at the end of the day, bro, all I can say is, man, Negroes, man, need to be multifaceted as they perceive themselves as taking on the challenges related to their condition. Like whether it be slavery you're talking about, whether it be, being under assault because you're a male in a society that's become hyper gynocratic. It's like we gotta be ambidextrous. We gotta be, I don't know, like we gotta be fucking dynamic. You can't be like static and you got one ideal and you got blinders on. You gotta be able to think flexibly, you know what I'm saying? Think outside of the box and inside of the box. And unfortunately, man, it's like we don't even know what to fucking do, bro. We just, frogs in a pot, man. And that motherfucking temperature, man, like a goddamn 102 right now. Niggas got fevers and shit.
But I have a question, though. Everything that you just mentioned, right? Isn't all of this just merely a consequence of technology? Meaning this, right? In terms of human development. So as technology goes, our relationship with God and nature changes, right? So if you go back, so Sanddog is 15. When I'm 15 years old, I'm playing Sega Genesis with my 2 younger brothers with comic books stacked to the ceiling. Now, 500 years before that, the 15-year-old Sanddog that lived in, I don't know, 1000 AD, right? That guy probably had 2 wives, 3 kids, and fought 4 or 5 wars and didn't make it to see 40. Maybe he died at 32, right? So is all of this a consequence of technology in terms of delayed human development? So even when you get till now, right, with human beings talking about, I could be young until I'm 40, or I could wait to have kids till I'm 40 or, 50 or whatever the case might be. Is everything that we're seeing just a mere consequence of technology?
Well, look at it like this. If we understand that there's a biological aspect that underlies it all with regard to genes, and how genes just want to reproduce and don't give a damn how it's actually done. It's not necessarily survival of the fittest. It's just looking for a trajectory to make it work. It's how we get things like altruism, etc. People demonstrating sacrificial behavior so that people who have better probabilities of surviving and whatnot may have that opportunity. Things like this are done on a genetic level. But with human beings, and I told you this before, Sandog, we have an interface with the environment, an intermediary that allows for us to survive, because unlike other things in nature, human beings are not required for nature to exist. And so in order to create an interface to navigate that reality in the real world, we require culture. And culture creates an artificial environment through which we can interface with the world. And the problem is, one of those byproducts of our culture has been the technology, which influences a greater sphere that we call civilization. And the problem is the civilization has begun to outpace the speed at which the culture can actually adapt. And so it's creating adverse responses in the natural environment, in the physical environment with regards to our infrastructure, and the social environment with regards to our institutions, which is what we're talking about. And so the motivations for interfacing with these institutions create imbalances in that ecosystem. And these imbalances are what we're identifying with. They are, in other words, the symptoms relative to the causal effect that has occurred, starting with that lack of response on the cultural part. That's not even considering the epigenetic influence that I'm calling cultural inertia from past traumas that were never resolved, but are now getting an ample opportunity to express themselves because there's no counterculture or counter pressure culturally to steer it in a different direction. So it results in a de-emphasis of family. And with that de-emphasis of family, people can survive without having as large groups. And people have not taken the time to consider what effect that has caused to our general well-being, both on a micro and macro level, where because we had this external force to contend with and we were using our culture to mitigate it, suddenly the civilization has removed it as a factor. And so now, we're experiencing a kind of cultural diabetes, so to speak. The problem isn't our insulin. The problem is this artificial substance that's been created, that's in our bloodstream, that the processes we haven't had time to actually break that down. Why? Because, our DNA knows how to break down, our systems know how to break down fructose, but it doesn't know how to do that without the enzyme present there. So we now have all of these social institutions put in place to counter or replace the need for large numbers of people to work together to succeed in something. And so now what do you do with all of these excess people who are now living socially closer, that don't have a defined purpose and role? That's exactly what the Mouse Utopia experiment was highlighting. What do you do in the absence of roles? Go ahead.
And that's exactly what Heidegger was trying to explain. I've been telling you motherfuckers about this shit. The technological mode of being creates a framework. So what I've been trying to explain to y'all, this is why I like Heidegger, even though I think he was an asshole and a Nazi, okay? But I want to be able to compartmentalize his work in metaphysics apart from what he was in terms of, like his political or his social life, right? Mm-hmm. Now, what he says is this. There are different ways of human beings thinking about being itself. Like, what is... Okay, so like metaphysics is your understanding of what reality actually is like. And it's different for different people in different eras. Now, he's talking about people in the Western world primarily. He's not talking about Africans or Asians and what their idea of isness is. Okay, even though, these things can overlap or whatever the case may be. He says there's 5 different epochs where Western people think what reality is. The first age is phusis. Things come in and out of existence. Everything has its time. It comes in, it emanates in, and then it recedes. Then there's poiesis, right? Where people perceive reality as things needing to be cultivated, right? So like imagine a sculptor, making a sculpture like, I don't know, like one of the greatest sculptures made, David, Michelangelo painting the Sistine Chapel or some shit. Like the idea is that there's beauty to be drawn out of the things that already exist. Okay, but here come the Romans. They come along and power is their main way of perceiving being. Okay, and their invention is not to bring the best out of things that are already there, but to pound things into shape with hammers, or to mold things into shape like concrete or mud and bricks. Like that's what Romans did. They built the Colosseum out of bricks. They built bridges out of bricks. You understand what I'm saying? So then after that comes the mode of being of the medieval era of Europeans, and it's this hierarchy, you know, related to religion, or, you know, the great chain of being, where everything has a fixed spot in there. You know, you can't deviate from the hierarchy. So you got gold, and, you know, it's the most pure and sublime sort of metal. And then you have clay and dirt and shit like that, which is much less closer to God. And people, you know, in the social order can be manifestations of, you know, people who are closer to God and people who are less, you know, close to God and shit like that. And, you know, there's different ranks and stations predicated upon how, you know, you fit in the hierarchy. All right. Then you get the era of modernity, and everything is about subjectivity. So truth and beauty and understanding no longer resides in something that's hierarchical, but it's all predicated upon the individual whims of the subject. Okay. Now, I know this is long and drawn out. I'm sorry to have done this, but in the end, he says that there's something called the technological mode of being, and what it does is it's about calculating. It's about efficiency and productivity at all costs, and it's ceaseless. It never stops, okay? And so what it does is it perceives everything, or even the world itself, like a gigantic gas station, okay? What do I mean by that? Okay, the soil. Like everything is something to be exploited, to be stripped, to be, you know, calculated, planned on, and computed, right? And it computes ever anew, ever more promising. At the same time, more economic possibilities. But the problem, though, is again, the thinking, according to this technological mode of being, races from one prospect to the next. The calculation thinking never stops, and it never collects itself. But it does not calculate the meaning that reigns in everything that is. And calculating, he says, presumes nature to be nothing more than a fucking big-ass gigantic gasoline station, an energy source for modern technology and industry. Ain't, you know, like Native Americans didn't perceive the environment as a fucking gas station. Like you can just take it, strip it down, and come with a bulldozer or come with a machine and just desecrate it. The land is sacred. It's like the flowers are our sisters. The beavers and the fucking bears are our brothers. You know what I'm saying? This is how they perceived it cosmologically. But the technological mode of being lets you see everything is just baseless, spiritless matter. Okay? And human beings become no more than that. Like slavery is a perfect example of this shit.
There we go.
All you are is a cog in a wheel, a calculation on how to make more bread, how to get more money.
That's capitalism, yeah. It is base, yeah.
So basically he says, look, one of the things that human beings have to be able to do is to stop at some point the calculation and the thinking related to profit and efficiency and productivity. It's like, okay, it's cool to have it, but you have to be able to unplug from the shit. And if you don't, you lose sight of what it actually means to be a fucking human being. And how do you do this? He says you have to engage in focal practices. Like human beings at their best are not engaged in calculation at all. Like the shit that human beings do that's the dopest shit in the world, they're not thinking at all. Like a jazz musician, if that motherfucker's playing a dope ass motherfucking solo, he's not using his understanding of scales in a thoughtful way. He's fucking just playing the shit. Like the dopest niggas you see hooping, they practice 1,000,000 times and not a movement is fluid. And they don't need to think about it. They just know, okay, this is what I do in this instance. All the thinking and the calculating gets in the way of you being able to do dope shit. Okay? Like the best sports or players or the athletes don't have to fucking sit there and think about it. Like even like Charlie Parker once said, here's a quote from him. Okay, learn the scales, learn all the theory and shit, and forget that shit and play. Human beings have forgotten how to play, man. You know what I'm saying? Like, I mean, you know, it's cool to calculate, it's cool to think, it's cool to reflect, but sometimes you got to pull back from that shit and engage in what they call focal practices, where you get to see human beings, like, sitting at a table. Like, families, I guarantee you today, they don't even fucking eat together no more.
They don't.
No.
Like, to sit at the table, to have conversations with each other, to laugh, to drink, to eat, which is a holy sacrament, really, actually, is what it is. You know what I'm saying? Which we done lost sight of that. So it ain't even cool to eat together no more. Kids, while they eating, they looking at their goddamn iPad or their iPhone. They got earplugs in their ear.
Yeah, it started with the boomers when parents put us in front of the TV to eat. So
yeah, human beings just devolve reality into the sum of its parts. And it's like classic East versus West understanding of what reality even is. If you break everything down to the sum of its parts, you know, it loses its life. You know, things simply are what they are. And if you can't have the capacity to accept it for what it is, to not need to break something down to its constituent parts, then you've got this value-based system of reality that's predicated on its relative ability for you to continually capitalize on it infinitely. Which, again, surprise, surprise, there's a limit to that, you know? But
here's a quote. Here's a quote directly from Heidegger. Okay, and it's crazy though, because it's the same shit that happened to Negroes. You know, like, but it's happening to people worldwide, and I think BGS is on to something when he begins to talk about the Mouse Utopia and Nameless as well. When you talk about industrialization and how it leads to our decay, it's the technology and the form of human association that's creating the loss of connections and the tethering of people. We never were designed to live in these big ass megaplexes, man.
no,
this is not how we evolved. Okay, so look, many Germans. This is Heidegger. Many Germans have lost their homeland, have had to leave their villages and towns, because that's how they normally live, right? They have been driven from the native soil. Countless others whose homeland was saved have yet wandered off. They have been caught up in the turmoil of the big cities and resettled in the wastelands of industrial districts. They are strangers now in their former homeland. And those who have stayed on in their homeland, often they are still more homeless than those who have been driven from their homeland. Hourly and daily, they are chained to radio and television. Now this shit, we ain't even talking about the internet. We ain't even talking about cable television to stay on 24 hours. This motherfucker wrote this shit 40, 50, maybe 50 years ago.
Yeah, okay? I mean, look at the black community, right? When they came from the matriarchal setting in the rural areas, right, and moved to the cities, right, they started losing connection. So what he said about the Germans that happened to them in the 19th century, same thing happened to black people in the 20th century, right? Same thing, same cycle.
Yeah, I mean, and so look, continuing, this is what he says. Hourly and daily, they are chained to radio and television. Week after week, the movies carry them off into uncommon, but often merely common realms of the imagination and give the illusion of a world that is no world. This is one of the things that our culture, black culture especially, is fucked up off reality TV and the lifestyle that motherfuckers is living in these worlds that aren't worlds at all. I mean, like, it's fantasy shit. You know what I'm saying? Even, I was trying to tell motherfuckers, like, MTV Cribs and shit, even that shit was fake. Motherfuckers showing you a lifestyle they don't even have. These entertainers don't even have that shit. Okay? Not to say none of them have it, but even they don't have the shit that they acting as if they have with smoke and cameras. Okay? So, look, picture magazines are everywhere available. All that with which modern techniques of communication stimulate, assail, and drive man, all that is already much closer to man today than his fields around his farmstead, closer than the sky over the earth, closer than the change from night to day. So this technology is closer to you than reality is fucking self, right? closer the convention and customs, closer than the customs and conventions of his village than the tradition of his native world. So what happens when Hollywood and the Matrix actually becomes your reality? You become detached from fucking reality.
You know,
The simple shit that would make you happy and it would make you satisfied and fulfilled no longer is able to fulfill you and satisfy you. That's why you got Japanese motherfuckers, boys primarily, going through hikikomori and shit. They just hermits in their rooms. They're not tethered to anything. They're not connected to anything but this false ass world. They play video games, watch porn, and they get fucked up, and that's it. They don't do shit. They don't go nowhere. They're stuck in a technological vacuum, right? So I love technology, but human beings have to know how to go in and out of it. It's like we have to know how to unplug and say, okay, enough of this shit. It's time for me to get in tune with nature. Let me go take a walk through the woods or some shit. Let me go camping or something and leave my phone in the car. You know what I'm saying? Or leave it at home plugged in. I'm unplugging for a week. We can't even do that shit no more. Dude, I grew up in an era where there wasn't no cell phones. Now I can't leave the crib without the cell phone. Anyway, man. I'm sorry, man. I went on.
Oh, no, that's where we at. Because I think it all connects, man. Like, when you talk about how in the world can you plan moves based on the current environment now, we need to understand all of these influences began again in the first industrial wave. These are all checks that got written back then that are now being called for currently in this present moment. Really, most of Generation X had those checks cashed in on them. And, you know, all they've done is follow this kick the can mechanic. You know, all right, well, first it was get a job, work for this corporation, you'll be all right. That fell through when the dollar crashed. Now it's go get you an education in college. That'll solve everything. Now folks are surrounded in crippling debt. What was in response to that for our demographic? We decided the women went a very, very specific direction with regard to that and gained access through that because the environment made it very easy for them to do so. So much so that ironically, and maybe I need to sit down and do a video and qualify this a bit more aggressively. I think the end result left modern society to be more suitable to female nature in general. And as a result,
no. Let me tell you what's happening. Bro, here's the reality, right? I know motherfuckers ain't gonna like the assessment. Women idolize masculinity. This culture is nothing but, it idolizes masculinity so much.
They're trying to be it.
Everybody, women want to be dudes now because they think that they're missing out on something that men have or that they possess in virtue of being men. Like, think about the arguments that they're using. Men are privileged. Men have it better. Things go men's way. Men have this power. They're telling you they love dudes. They want to be one.
But what I'm saying is the technology is giving them access to that is what I'm saying. Because if we were in a different environment, even if they had that desire, it wouldn't play out in the way that we see it because it just technologically wouldn't be possible. We wouldn't have the ability to shrink the social environment as small as we can due to things like the internet, for example.
This is what I say. The utility of masculinity has been outsourced, and I won't say outsourced. It's just been universalized, and it's been technologically modified such that everybody can have access to it instantaneously, amorphously. So, like, if you need protection, I don't need fucking Nameless or Sandal or Faulkner. All I gotta do is call the boys in blue. They're there. They're there for me.
But here's what stays the same, though, Gigi. The fact that, number one, the culture is still calibrated to a time prior to the modern era. As a result, a woman's ability to exercise soft power is not diminished to the same degree that a man's physical domination to hard power was at. And what I mean by that is a single accusation of a woman can destroy a man. But a man can't do that same thing. And large in case, that's because women have access to that soft power still by cultural right of way to do so, predicated solely on the fact that she's female and animated by the energy of a snapshot culturally that was taken prior to the Industrial Revolution. And you covered that a lot on your channel before. I'm just saying, this is an example of the culture not catching up to the changes that the civilization is experienced by way of technology. And what I'm saying is, what it's inadvertently done is it's created an environment where women not only gain the proxy access to masculinity, but they still maintain limited diminishing returns on their ability to command soft power and recruit the power of other men directly and institutionally. And this has created a de facto imbalance of total power when it comes to being human in this environment, specifically this fourth industrial environment that we see going on now. Case in point, why you've got the dudes that were previously seen as incels now employing feminine power by literally transitioning to being female because of how calibrated this society is to acknowledge the soft power women have command to. They're seeing they can, quote, get the best of both worlds, end quote.
Right. You know, like, this is what I'll say. I say men are suckers for women, man. They don't know how to tell them no. And that's one of the reasons we got so many problems. Like,
I concur.
But at one time, men, you know, but also men did this shit to themselves. It's men who drove these forces to where they are. It's men are the ones who are the problem, right? To be perfectly honest. And in particular, it's white dudes with these systems. That's why BGS, I know he left, but we went over like the 10 Years Abolition Act and how the courts of chancery in England basically took power away from, you know, from fathers. Increasingly, over and over again, they basically took, you know, paternal power away. And then white guys sit back and they wonder what the fuck happened. Cause you bitch ass niggas, you stupid motherfuckers took your own power away and gave it to a bunch of officials.
Didn't they create the Victorian era though? I mean, this is the same people we talking about. I just want to remind you, they got a pattern of doing this.
But I mean, so look, I guess they felt like, okay, it's one thing, you know, to adjudicate responsibly. It's another thing to, you know, tip the balance so much so, and to what end? Right now, the legal industry is just making money off people's misery. They don't give a fuck about children. They don't give a fuck about the best interest of the child. They say they do, but they don't give a fuck about the best interest of the child. Because if they actually gave a fuck about the best interest of the child, they would do what they could do in order to try to preserve fathers' input in their children's lives. If they really gave a fuck about family life and families in general, what they would try to do is try to find ways to adjudicate to preserve familial arrangements. But they don't do that shit. All they're doing is trying to make bread, bruh. They prostituted themselves out. The judiciary in this country is a cesspool of unjust cesspool motherfuckers. I mean, I know I'm being redundant when I say that, but they just corrupt, dog. It's devils in robes, bruh. They don't give a fuck about nobody but their goddamn selves and their own careers, bruh. It is what it is.
Shout out to capitalism.
And a lot of these dudes, man, was raised by single moms. A lot of these judges and shit was raised by single moms. Don't like they fucking daddies. We got a generation of niggas that themselves that don't like they daddies. Hate they fucking daddies. Will tell you they hate they daddies. But they want you to love them muff. They want you to love their ass. They'll tell you they hate their daddy. But they want their kids to love them, no. Now tell me how that shit's supposed to work.
Well, and then the sons internalize that and then go on to do what towards other people that look like they do. I mean, that's why I said, go ahead.
All I'm saying is, man, it used to be, look, I'm not going to say that women have always been treated fairly. They have not in America, okay? But then the question is, like, have men always been treated fairly in this motherfucker? White dudes ain't been treated fairly in this motherfucker. We act like all white dudes started off in the country at the same space and all had the same rights, all at the same time. That's just an inaccurate assessment of how fucking America was and how the history of freedom in the Western world developed in and of itself. Because modernity is the answer to the fucking oppression of what they consider to be ecclesiastical and, the divine right of kings autocracy. They resisted against that shit. It just is what it is. I mean, it took time for us to get to this place where we saying, well, everybody's supposed to have a right to vote and everybody has the same set of inalienable rights and so on and so forth. This shit was not the way, this was not always this way in this country, even for white dudes.
Yep.
And we already know, like, the history of race in this country makes things more messy. Because there's no way that you're going to satisfy my intellectual understanding by saying that all men, by virtue of being men, have privilege over women when you got white women who are causing niggas to get lynched and fucking murdered. And can get a white dude like Will Smith, all they gotta do is look at her fucking husband and get this nigga killed. Put it hung up from a poplar tree and fucking turned into a goddamn dark ass marshmallow. And we gonna sit here and say, well, women had it hard and racism and sexism are pretty much parallel kinds of oppression, analogous to each other. No, they're not. Some bullshit. So you mean to tell me Thomas Jefferson's white ass wife had less power than some nigger slave on the plantation? It don't even make sense. And you got these white chicks, man, with signs and shit doing the best they can. Like, I don't want my fucking kids to go to school with these niggers.
You got that pic? That screenshot?
Man, I'm just saying, bro, it don't even, like, it doesn't make sense to me, bro. I'm not even trying to be ignorant by saying this, but it doesn't make any fucking sense to me. There's the picture right there. We don't want these commies in our fucking school. Then you got Negroes like saying that well, we were commies and I was a fucking FBI agent and I tried to stop the commies. And this the type of white people you're dealing with and shit. These the white folks you're dealing with at the time. No, but I don't want my child to be bused. All right. These white girls don't look like they fucking broke and destitute and barefoot and fucking pregnant to me. They got their hair all coiffured up and every goddamn thing. Brand new clothes from Walmart. Look at these big ass bitches. These bitches are not little, skinny, dirty faces and shit with dirt legs. Motherfuckers got brand new shoes on, sparkling white ass goddamn Klan robes and shit.
Pristine, fam.
Matter of fact, they made them themselves, with them little singing sewing machines, man.
Man, bro. Look at this shit. You mean to tell me that white woman right there got less power than this nigga hanging from a fucking tree?
Let them tell it.
Come on, bro. And they'll hang a Negro woman too. But not as much as the Negro man. But if they got out of line, they'll hang your ass from a tree as well. Now, it's all kumbaya. All women got a sisterhood and shit. It just confuses me. And the women have already postulated that it's a brotherhood among men. They call it the patriarchy. Like we all banded together in a concerted effort to fuck over Eve and Angela and shit. We just doing the best we can to hold them back.
Shout out to Team Muhaha.
Wonder Twins unite. Fuck over a bitch. God damn, I'm just
America first. Look at these women are not destitute. They don't look like they fucking can't go outside. Like they got some robes and shit covering their head, all right. But it ain't for the reasons like Muslim women's got hijabs and shit and can't show their bodies. It's a difference here. Nah, I mean, I had to show it because Nameless said go ahead and show it. Look, old ass grandma, like, I won't see that before I die. I gotta see one more nigga killing.
Jesus Christ. They look like they going to the fucking movies.
I mean, she got a whole fur coat on.
Got
Out
the
here,
Sundays,
boy.
you got your good clothes on. Let's go see this nigga get hung up.
Out here dripping, dog. Like,
You got the beer and got the juju bees.
he said, juju bees.
They're going to go see a show.
Look, I'm not anti-Negro. I'm just anti-body. I'm just against race mixing. I'm not anti-Negro. I'm just against race mixing.
That's like saying that I'm not against Coke, but I'm against soda.
Look, states' rights. I believe that you going back where you come from. You don't need to be around us. But these bitches in the house talking about they oppressed and shit. I feel like I'm in a comfortable concentration camp. While you out here picking my car, you got my food ready? Bitch, man, fuck you. Now these bitches talking about they doing double duty housework and they already had domestics and shit doing the work for them. Man, fuck these bitches, man.
They can't even. Bro, they couldn't even breastfeed their own kids,
bro.
man.
It's called the year of the lazy woman. Like, how you gonna say that cleaning, cooking, and washing your own ass is slavery?
I'm just saying, how the fuck you gonna say you doing double housework when y'all primarily had domestics doing the goddamn housework fucking for you? You had Negro women doing the goddamn breastfeeding, like you said, doing the diaper changing and cooking and cleaning your motherfucking shit in your house. But now you talking about we're doing double duty. Man, fuck that bullshit, man. Fuck that.
Oh, but look, it gets even better because guess who generally ended up outlasting the freaking plantation owner in the first place and ended up owning everything on that motherfucker?
But she didn't get any rights.
Man.
Then check it. Then peep the shit. I already showed this shit about what in North Carolina the Negro women to be put to work.
Oh, that's.
I mean, it's Negro women to be put to work.
Right.
So these bitches talking about they doing double duty, and they don't want to do double duty housework, but they put Negro women to work because these bitches don't want to work. They ain't been working from the beginning. Look, regardless of whether they want to or have to, look, regardless of whether they want to or have to, able-bodied Negro women in Greenville who are not regularly employed ought to be put to work, put in jail, or fined heavily. At his special meeting yesterday afternoon, City Council discussed the situation with regard to this class of loafers. Not these white bitches in their houses who trying to loaf because they want somebody else to do the goddamn work for them. But they'll say you a loafer because you ain't doing work for them. Man, fuck these hoe ass motherfuckers. I don't have a problem saying it. Okay? And it seemed that all the members of the council were agreed that steps should be taken to compel them to engage in some useful occupation. Get your bitch to motherfucking iron her clothes, iron your goddamn shirts, and cook your meals. And wash your toilets and shit.
Now, sir, we cannot allow the good white woman's hands to be dirty.
Look, it was decided that an ordinance similar to the one now in force requiring all able-bodied men to work at least 5 days per week should be passed with regard to these Negro women. Such an ordinance will be prepared and voted on at the next regular meeting of the council. A number of complaints have come to members of council of Negro women who are not at work and who refuse employment when it is offered them, the result being that it is exceedingly difficult for families, white motherfuckers, who need cooks and laundresses to get them. Case closed, nigga. Now these the same bitches talking about they need some motherfuckers, they mad because they being exploited, they doing double duty, double work.
I'm mad as hell, and I'm going to take it from you.
They doing double work.
I could see their gripes. You know, you looking at all these ungrateful Negroes who fought in the Civil War for their freedom. But didn't we clothe? Didn't we house you? Hell, we even hooked you up with a good man or woman. You were part of the family. Matter of fact, we kept your whole family together most of the time.
Man, this shit right here, it pisses me off only because the story is more complex, more nuanced than the way that they put on. They act as if, like there was no inconsistencies, no contradictions internal to some of the own things that they saying, especially white women. Like, and they're wise about it. Tommy Lee, you need to get these black women up in here. We need domestics. I can't do all this work. So now the black woman got to go do your work and go home and do the work. That's the real double duty shit right there. But we ain't having a conversation about that shit. We having a conversation patterning after white women and their fucking, their inconveniences. All this shit is white bitches complaining about how fucked up they got it.
But the double whammy is the fact that black women, even though they went and did that, will get blamed for the fact that that newspaper article got printed and that was a reality back then. Like,
you should have fought for us. You should have protected us. You should have got us out of the slavery. You should have made us stop having to deal with the white folks. It's up for you to go fight these fights. Even though they show you white women was spies in the revolution and shit. They was fucking soldiers on the field. And even black women is evidence that they was fighting in the fields and shit too. But now y'all supposed to be soft girls and shit? Come on, man. Cut it out. Stop, man.
They soft girls, but chewing tobacco.
Soft ass girls. But they soft ass girls right now, but they butch. Get all them butch ass dyke motherfuckers. Let's roll.
Nah,
you love manhood so goddamn much. You like pussy so goddamn much. Time for you to man up and get down with this dirty shit. Let's.
I mean, look at Brittany Griner. You leave America because you were afraid to go to jail for child support, but you end up in a jail in Russia. Can't make this shit up.
But yeah, man, we at the 3:15 mark, man. I didn't mean, I know Admiral, he in a whole different time zone and shit. He probably tired as a motherfucker, Sand dog, you still there, dog? Yeah, but when motherfuckers get to talking to you, Sand dog, you probably sleep like a motherfucker. I know you need some rest, dog. I feel you, dog. You got a newborn over there too and shit, man. I know, man. I know we ain't expect to go 3 hours, dog. You know what I'm saying?
No, this is what we do, dog. I signed up for it. You know what I'm saying? So this is what we do. but nah, team, man. Look, man. In closing, I just hope that you guys know. Look, there's that old Bible verse, right, in Ephesians 6, where it says, "We don't deal in flesh and blood, but in principalities and spiritual wickedness in high places." Right? So, know that the battle is not with flesh and blood. You're dealing with a well-oiled machine. And so we have to understand what the machine is, right? And its components and how it works and what's our place in it in order to decide what we're going to do in the future, right? And I will tell you this, any battlefield commander worth his salt is more than just a good rifleman or a tanker or artilleryman, right? He is an excellent cultural anthropologist. He is an excellent economist. And for damn sure, if anything else, he has to be an excellent historian, right? So when I took my troops over to Iraq, guess what? I studied all of those desert battles, starting with the father of my craft. So think about it, right? In history, right? I'm American. I'm African American. The father of my craft, General Rommel, right, is German. Right? The father of my craft and modern warfare is German. So, and his nickname was, guess what? The Desert Fox.
Mm.
You know what I'm saying? So there's always been cavalry, right? But studying it from the perspective of modern warfare, because I needed to learn from the mistakes of my ancestors in order to preserve the lives of my men and our equipment. So history is important. Every battlefield commander is a historian. And even then, when you go into football, right? Peyton Manning. Peyton Manning had a book. When he played, Peyton Manning had a book on every defensive coordinator in the NFL, how he thought, what he did. And I'll say this and I'll shut up. And I was watching NFL 100, and I heard Deion Sanders talk about Michael Irvin when he used to guard him and Jerry Rice. And Deion Sanders had a dope ass statement because, again, for those who know football, he played defense. Deion Sanders said, 3/4 of the earth is covered by water, and I cover the rest. And you know what I'm saying? And Deion, you know what I'm saying? And Deion, you know what I'm saying? And Deion Sanders is talking about Michael Irvin and Jerry Rice and said, when he stuck his leg out like this, when his hips did that, when his eyes did this, I knew what he was going to do, right? And so at the end of the day, right, in order to deal with the things that you're dealing with in life in general, you have to look both within and without and study the nature of both in order to move forward. So that's my closing remarks. And then, man, I'll see y'all soon, God willing, for paragraph 3.
For sure, man. I appreciate your presence so much, Admiral Smoke, otherwise
Yeah.
known as Sand Dog. You know what I'm saying? Appreciate you, man. And sorry to have taken over and dominated the conversation, man, on
Oh
my
man,
drift.
come on.
You know, you know how I
Come on, man.
drift, bro.
No, we love it, man. Especially, we got that BGS drift, man, and we love it. We love it.
Yeah, you gotta indulge into the BGS drift, man. You can't
Yeah.
say no to the BGS drift, bro.
Facts.
Facts.
You know what I'm saying? You
But
can't do that one, bro.
nah, man.
Oh, I didn't mean to do that. Hold on.
Yeah.
That's me getting busy, on the goddamn keyboard. Hold on. Yeah. So, but anyway, man, appreciate that. And one of the things that kind of backs up what you said, like about knowing the enemy and what they're about to do. Like Kobe Bryant, basically stood up after being asked a question about how he defends and how do you know how to defend the pump fake. He was like, first of all, you got to look at people's feet. Like if somebody puts a foot behind them, like their feet are no longer parallel to each other and they pump fake, that's not, the motherfucker ain't about to take a shot. That's just really just a pump fake. Now, if they have their feet squared up together, then he's about, potentially he could shoot the rock. But if you see their feet in another position and they're not square with one another, they're not about to shoot the ball. That's some bullshit, right? So it's like you got to look at the cues from, your opponents to find out, what kind of plays you should make. So that's how that's at least the first step into defending the pump fake. So it's like you got to know what the enemy's doing. You got to know, bro. And part of, knowing what the enemy's doing is, calling attention to it and being, like, that's some clever shit they did. Some slick shit. How can I flip it around? Like, what was that shit? Like, that move, Kaido or whatever, some shit? Where you flipping the script on these motherfuckers and you're like, okay, it's like the red lightsaber and the blue one. It's like, the Jedi's with the Force, used for either good or bad. Like, you got to know how to command the Force as well and how to, counter your opponent. And, you can only counter them if you study them. You know what I'm saying? So, there you go. So, Negro, the most powerful Negro in the universe. You care to make a statement, man, before we get up out of this hole? That motherfucker ain't even there either. Nameless, you want to say something before we bounce out of here, man?
Yeah.
Oh, the Negro came back. He came back. Negro, you got something to say before we burn out?
Yeah, you had to fight the forces of evil and shit over Castle Hoodstar. But one, I think people need to really pay attention to these lessons you're giving out because this is college level, if not graduate level shit that you're giving out, and I always give you your flowers. Number two, support black male media. You got to help us help you. Okay, a lot of people are afraid to talk about these subjects. Number three, the one thing you have to learn from military science that black men still have yet to even comprehend: you have no allies. You're all you got. You don't fight with the army you want. You fight with the army you have. Woo! And I'm gonna try to start a stream later on tonight. Thank you again, Doc. Woo!
Man, thank you. I want to see you here more often, man. These guys want to include you in the conversation. You know what I'm saying? And I think,
Anytime.
Yeah, for sure. They want you to, they enjoy you being in the conversation. So come, you're always welcome, my brother.
That's facts. Super facts.
So you see what I'm saying? He just confirmed. Sand Dog just confirmed it. So,
Indeed.
it is what it is. I was like, damn, he welcome anytime, so don't ever feel like you're a stranger. Feel me?
It's good to be wanted, man. Just I'm gonna just grab the cigars and the cognac, and I'm gonna be there.
There you go. There you go, man. Nameless, man. Take us home, bro.
Well, you guys kind of touched on what I really just wanted to cover in general, to really highlight this point, because of a lot of the criticisms that have been leveled, not just at the space, but unfortunately at the PhDs and other individuals that speak in a message that just may be going over people's heads because it's so adjacent to what folks may have heard before. But let me just read this, and at risk of taking a little extra time, I just want to read this.
Go ahead, bro.
Raising a host of 100,000 men and marching them great distance entails heavy loss on the people, a drain on the resources of the state, and the daily expenditure will amount and exceed thousands of ounces of silver. There will be commotion at home and abroad, and men will drop down exhausted on the highways. As many as 700,000 families will be impeded in their labor. Hostile armies will face each other for over years, striving for victory which is decided in a single day. This being so, to remain in ignorance of the enemy's conditions simply because one grudges the outlay of 100 ounces of silver in honors of opulence is the height of inhumanity. One who acts thus is no leader of men, no present help him to his sovereign, no master of victory. Thus, what enables the wise sovereign and the good general to strike and conquer and achieve things far beyond the reach of ordinary men is foreknowledge. Now, this foreknowledge cannot be elicited from spirits. It cannot be obtained inductively from experience, nor by any deductive calculation. Knowledge of the enemy's disposition can only be obtained from other men. Hence, the use of spies, of whom there are 5: local spy, inward spy, converted spy, doomed spy, and surviving spy. When these 5 kinds of spies are all at work, none can discover their secret system. This is called divine manipulation of the threads and is the sovereign's most precious faculty. That is taken from the 13th chapter in The Art of War, and it is the foundation of the martial art I study. That chapter. And this book was written over 2,000 years ago. At least evidence of it was surmised and recorded over 2,000 years ago, which means this information is very likely much older than that. The common denominator here is the human element involved in this. And what we're talking about ultimately is statecraft. And irrespective of how you want to operate, if you want to create Fubu Hill and from Fubu Hill either build Wakanda or RBG land, or if you're going to follow the model that a lot of us here advocate, which is Mandalorianism all day, and do what you can with regards to that, you still need an understanding of foreknowledge. And that can only happen by understanding what has occurred so that you can put in the context what will be. That way you can make an accurate and appropriate response in the present moment. Otherwise, you are subject to everybody who has acquired foreknowledge and history of you.
Yeah, that's deep, man. It's deep. So, gotta be learning, man. You gotta keep your eyes open. You gotta keep, first of all, in order to even implement a plan like that, you have to have a plan and you have to be developing strategy. it far exceeds the kind of strategies that we utilize at the current moment, man. You know what I'm saying? So we'll learn as we understand, man. We get more information. We'll learn and do more. You know, we'll do better if we knew better. So we learning. You know, we learn one from each other. You know, but that's dope what he said about, you know, the only way you can learn is from other men. You can't learn it from deductive logic. Can't learn it from spiritual divination. You can only learn it from getting out there in the world, rubbing, you know, shoulders and getting access to information through inward, outward, you know, doom, surviving, or flipping motherfuckers, double agent type shit. The only way to get it. So anyway, my brother, I appreciate y'all presence, man. I want to give a shout out to Cameron S for the Cash App, man. And the Cash App do work, man. You know what I'm saying? Your boy every now and then, man, you know, he needs some support. You feel me? Shout out to David Brewster for the Cash App. Shout out to Swift for the Cash App. Shout out to Corby Goodwin for the Cash App. Appreciate that support. You feel me? I'll be back on tomorrow, man. I know tomorrow's Friday. I'll be back on tomorrow. I'm going to talk about the passport, bros, because I ain't said shit about it yet. I got to say something. Feel me? Right now, your boy, Dr. Neil, man, he over there on his channel talking about passport, bros, right now. So I'm about to go peep him out and see what he talking about. So I'll holler at y'all on the next one, man. Thank you guys for joining me. I'll holler at y'all on the next one. Peace.
Oh.
Woo.
Us.
Os. Rue.